Here we go. All right. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to yet another Prevalent Evil Contagion podcast, the show where we discuss everything related to Resident Evil. I'm your host, Renegade Operative, and we are talking about the man, the myth, the legend, the man in black, Albert Wesker. We're doing a first time ever character analysis podcast where we talk specifically about the character and everything, his motives, history, look, quotes. It should be very entertaining. As always, I'm your host, Renegade Operative, and I'd like to introduce Ren Ben.
Hey everybody, I'm Ren Ben. I'm a variety streamer on Twitch and super excited to be here because I'm also a massive Albert Wesker fan.
Next up, we have Brendan.
Hi, I just got off a nap, so I might sound groggy for a couple of minutes. Apologies.
Don't worry, he's slightly knocked out from some nudity on Twitter. He'll be fine. No, I'm just kidding.
I won't confirm or deny that.
But next up, we have Avian.
Hello. I'm also a variety streamer on Twitch at just, a loner at the end of the day.
Next up, we have Slash.
Hello, Slash. Really excited to be here because Resident Evil is my favorite horror video game franchise with probably one of the best villains in gaming. So it's always good to at least, get some opinions out there about things you like. So, yeah.
All right, so let's get into it with the first question. What are your thoughts on Albert Wesker from a design perspective and how that design has evolved over the years? I want you to go first, Avian.
Holy shit. Okay. My first thoughts on Albert Wesker. I was fairly young when I first saw him, and I really, really liked it. It was different from other, bad guys, I would say. He was just a normal person. I think that's probably one of the scariest things in real life is anybody can be a bad guy around you. Anyone could be dangerous and you won't know it till it's already too late. So having the main antagonist, the main villain of your story be another person, I think was probably one of the best things that they did going into this series, minus, I transform into an evil giant monster now. So, and his design evolving over the years has, it's little slight changes here and there. There was never really a huge drastic change to his character design, and I really, really like that. Like how they maintained a simple approach when it came to him.
Brandon, what about you? What do you think of Wesker's design and how it evolved over the years?
I would say Wesker probably had a more both simple but unique design. My first true exposure to the character was really on Resident Evil 5. But what I love from his previous incarnation is the suit and tie look. Because that was not common for a lot of characters back in the day. Hell, I don't think it's still common now, right? And especially with Resident Evil 4, both the original and the remake, he's walking around with just a suit and tie or has a coat on, depending on the version of the character, right? So Wesker is just a swag incarnate, and it's a shame that he lost it. That and the shades, just icing on the cake.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, well, his final design, I'm not really a big fan of, but of course, big monster thing. He had to put some tentacles on there. I'm gonna go next. I think that Wesker's design is cool. It mostly is him wearing like black or some form of black like black fatigues and everything. I like the Stars outfit where it's kind of like just black and then the blue undershirt as well, but then it evolved into him wearing black fatigues and then the black leather signifying the supervillain of the character, as well as the professional suits that you see in RE4. I thought that was also pretty cool looking. So it's mostly stayed like consistent with the glasses and everything. That's the main motif of Wesker. If you're gonna see him somewhere, where it's kind of funny that he wears sunglasses at night, then you're gonna see him in glasses of some form, obviously hiding the mutated pupils in his eyes and everything. And I think that was a big staple that kind of worked for the character, even though people said it's kind of stupid during RE1 to fire into dogs wearing sunglasses at night. But hell, he's Wesker, he can do it. So I just thought that that remained consistent and that that looked really good as we progress more and more into the franchise. Ren Ben, what about you? What do you think of his design?
So I really like his design, and kind of like I think Avian hit the nail on the head in that um especially because like the first time I actually got introduced to him and saw him was Code Veronica Wesker.
Mm.
And like I knew of Wesker before that, but I what I like about his design, even as the outfits have changed over the games and over the years, is that he always has had a almost understated look to him. Like, you know, he's the bad guy, but he doesn't have that outward appearance of a big monster, or just looking at him you wouldn't guess that he has superhuman strength. That, you know, it's like, oh, he's that's really odd, he wears sunglasses. Oh, okay, he does it to hide, you know, before a pre like superhuman strength, he did it to hide emotions. And I don't know, like, they just, everything about his design is very purposeful, but in a way where it kind of subverts your expectations in a way, which kind of to time with what you said, Ren, does make that very final form in RE5 a little, not a bummer, but like up to that point he's been so understated and kind of like kept it on, almost kept it what he can do under wraps, and then it's just like it was all on display and it was like, oh, but it's so different from what you would expect for him. But from a design perspective, I've always really liked the fact that he does to a point kind of just look like a normal dude, but underneath he can do a lot more than that. And I like how they've kind of kept that hidden and kind of subverted your expectations in a way with that.
I will defend RE5 at least real quick, despite not liking the Ouroboros design. At least it was a thing of he was mostly the only one able to control Ouroboros, which is why it's like it's a storyline perspective. So I kind of like it in that regard, but I thought in terms of design it could have been a little bit better, to be honest. Like, it's cool that he wrapped the airplane around the tentacles and everything, and that was a little bit like awesome, but outside of that I expected something a little bit more bigger and better. That's just my opinion though.
Oh man,
That's a good
Ren,
point.
you had me at punching boulders there.
But
Isn't that what everybody goes for?
Yeah.
I can't wait to see that scene remade. That's gonna be freaking ridiculous. But Brandon, you were saying something before I move to the next person?
I was just saying that Wesker just had an uncanny look to him. I guess that's the best way to describe him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's one of the things that, like I said, has been very cool within the series, like blonde hair, slick back, glasses. Just, if you imagined a badass villain looking like this, then it gets no better than this character. Slash, what do you think of Wesker's look and design?
Well, Wesker's design for me is akin to Shadow the Hedgehog in terms of the edgiest edgy that ever edged. Um, Especially his Resident Evil 5 design. I feel like that's. I like Wesker in Resident Evil 5, but I feel like his design in that game is leaning too try hard. But like his original Stars Captain design is honestly one of my favorite villain designs because it's kind of a red herring at the same time, because there's so many like twists and turns that they try to make you think, oh, it's not Wesker, but then to reveal it is Wesker. And I guess the what's the word, the comfortability of that uniform for his teammates kind of sets the deception up even better for me. His Code Veronica design is it's not my cup of tea, but then again, Code Veronica isn't my cup of tea. as much as some of the other games are. And it's just his pale. I would make him almost akin to. This will be going to my roots. Michael Myers almost in the first game, very emotionless. This blank slate that always keeps you on edge, but you're not sure if he's really fucked up or not. And he always retained that, even through his like exposed villain arc. He was always kind of just emotionless with all these devious plans going on. And that it's much more of a striking visual personally for me than a very highly emotive villain like some of the ones we have gotten in Resident Evil. So for me, his design leaves enough of a mark that most villains in the series will never be able to like recreate. So yeah.
Also, go ahead.
I was gonna say I do have one thing I want to add though, because like Slash kind of made me think of this. One thing that I have liked about his design though is as the character evolved and he did become more of an exposed villain, they did lean into that more, and I like that because he's very matrix coded in RE5, and I always have really liked that.
That's kind of what a lot of people say. It's like he kind of just reminds me of Neo and Leather, and I guess if that was the aesthetic, it kind of works. But it's also like one of those things where it's like, how super villainy can you get with this guy in this costume? But personally, it's not my favorite. I will say my favorite outfit is Remake 4. I like the simplicity of just the normal like slacks and the vest and the undershirt. I just think it works really well in motion with that game when you play as him too. So it's kind of cool to see him block like these axes and kick people and run all over the place with this like suit on. It's kind of cool.
If we go by
100% agree.
favorites,
Yeah.
if we go by favorites though, I gotta go with Resident Evil 4 original.
Turtleneck.
Especially when they keep updating that design, in particular for other like side games or spin-offs, whatever. I just love that black suit and tie turtleneck with the jacket on, like the slick.
And then Chris stole it in Resident Evil Village, and that was the end of that story.
Yeah, what comes around goes around, right?
Yeah. Next, we're moving on. Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, sir.
Oh, my bad. But we're moving on to question number 2. So we're talking about Wesker's role initially as a STARS captain, and over the course of the game, you will see like some weird stuff. Like they would slowly build up this trust with him and his team, and you know, fighting monsters, and then over time, you'll see layers upon layers of deception within RE1. How did you feel when you finally pieced things together that he was a double crosser? And I'll go with Avian first.
How dare you?
My bad.
No, it's okay. You know, I don't really think I have a good answer for this, only because I go back to what I originally said. I was very young when I finally got into Resident Evil 1, because it wasn't my first game I played. I played Resident Evil 2 first, and then everything else, and then finally got around to 1. And just putting the pieces together here and there where, you know, what he would say throughout the game, and the little moments that you had with him, it never felt comfortable to be around him. Especially, I don't remember the guy's name, Ricardo or something, when he got shot, when he was trying to like let you know something was going on within the team, that everything wasn't right. Enrique, there we go. Thank you. To finally have the confirmation, the light turn on, it was just like a gut-wrenching feeling of just like, I knew it, but I didn't know it until it finally slapped me in the face. And I feel like being in that situation, if I was in real life, it would have been too late for me to do anything the same way it was for the team, you know? Luckily, towards the end, it was around the tyrant that decided to turn on him. But Without that being the case, I don't think Chris or Jill would have survived because of how well he had the upper hand. And, his cards were set pretty well. That there was really no way around it. The tyrant was literally the only thing that was unforeseeable on his end. That kind of, turned the tides for the team.
Brandon, what about you? What did you think of the initial story of Wesker turning into a double crosser?
Oh, this one's kind of complicated because, like, I didn't play Resident Evil 1 first. Or at least I haven't completed it first. I experienced Wesker from 5 first, right? So, yeah, I kind of already knew what to expect with that game, right? But with that in mind, it also depends on which version of Wesker. Because, Remake 1 Wesker and original Wesker are two different things. Because he's a goofball in the original game, but he is Wesker, as we know and love in the remake, right? As far as the original game is concerned, there's no way you can convince me that that guy was the mastermind. But this man felt like he got offended when he getting laughed at. And second of all, with remake though, it felt a little too obvious, with hindsight, because like he's more mysterious, more darker, rather than not necessarily like how you should be in Resident Evil 1, something that he should be a little bit more forthcoming with his teammates. He's kind of like that in certain spots with Chris in particular, because, he has a hard on for Chris. But yeah, it's kind of a little too obvious after a certain point with hindsight. That something's not right with him. But aside from that, though, I think Wesker is still an excellent double crosser or double agent. That I imagine if you knew him, it wouldn't be like that.
Yeah, I think in the original game, I just can't buy it because the characterization is more or less the characterization and how he's presented and how bad the voice acting is in RE1. I'm sorry, him laughing like, "Oh, Chris, stop it." I laughed so fucking hard when I heard that the first time. I kind of feel like Remake 1 gave it away a little bit too early if you play as Jill, because there's that conversation in the dormitories where you hear Wesker and Barry talking. So I kind of like, if that was my first RE game, I already knew something was like wrong there, because it sounds like already he's extorting him. And I understand they did that for like storyline purposes to show that yes, Barry has to be a good boy, otherwise his family's gonna get murdered. But I feel from there it's very well set up actually. I just think as they lay the breadcrumbs over and over again, and it kind of helps the story in a bit where Barry kind of plays dumb, where he says, I'm just talking to myself or whatever. But and Jill knows it too, which is what I love about that portion of the story. She knows it's full of shit. And that's why, like, she grabs Barry's gun and it's like, okay, start talking, because I had enough of this. It is well told, but they do kind of paint it on the wall for you, like, yes, this guy works for Umbrella, so you might have to look out for him. And I think the obvious clue was the lab, where you see him in the scientist coat with Umbrella, and then you see the hunter and all these monsters you fought over time. So you're thinking, oh, now I could put two and two together. It's like a very simple piece of the puzzle that was missing in the beginning. I'm not surprised when we get to the lab that he starts going ballistic, shooting Rebecca, all sorts of stuff, smacking Chris, everything starts to go crazy. And you're thinking, yeah, this guy is a complete maniac so far in the remake. So it gives that sort of great impression as you start to put the pieces together. And then finally you have it. And then the tyrant does his thing and he puts his claw into Wesker's chest. So for the most part, I liked it. I did see it coming from a mile away, but it probably didn't help that I played the original before that. But it felt like the remake had more context, which I appreciated. Next is Ren Ben. What do you think about Wesker's story as a double crosser?
I really liked that. So For me, like the first time I played through, because I haven't played the OG. I've watched, I like know enough about the OG one to like know the differences between that and the remake, but I've primarily played the remake, and I really liked how that was set up in the remake. And I think the remake was like the third Resident Evil game I played. And I really enjoyed how they set it up. And then what was really fun was once I went back and played it, and after playing it multiple times, it gave me even more appreciation for how things were set up. And then when you play Zero and you actually get like a little bit more of a peek into that, and I just remember like the first time I saw him in Zero and you see him sitting there in his Stars uniform, like, you know, yakking away with Birkin, I'm just like, oh, bastard. But so anyway, so I really enjoyed that storyline. What I think was also really interesting about by the time you get to the lab and he does start like he like the full thing is on display, is it kind of also shows how he, in his head, it's almost like in his head he had accomplished it. He's like, I did it, I won. And he gets too cocky and the hubris comes back to haunt him because the tyrant gets him. You know, all those things, like the dominoes kind of start to fall, and they fall very quickly, and he thought he had already won. So I thought that was a really satisfying end. Like if that had been the only Resident Evil game and that was how it ended, like it would have been a very satisfying ending, because he was the bad guy working from the background. He reveals his hand of cards at the end of the game and clearly got too cocky and it caught up with him. And I thought it was quite diabolical too, and you know, really early on established the idea of him being the mastermind, because he's not, like, with the exception, well, even by the time you get to RE5, like he's always like he's working behind the scenes. He's not the one out there doing everything, but he is also doing everything. You just don't see it because he's doing it in the background. He's the one pulling the strings. He's the one making sure that things happen the way he wants them to happen. And I really like that they established that even early on with the double agent role that he had, being both the head of Stars and also working for Umbrella, and, you know, essentially gathering combat data to go take that off and do his own thing. So I really enjoy that particular part of the storyline.
Slash, what about you? What do you think of Wesker's sort of role in RE1 when he went from like sort of, you know, false hero to a villain?
Well, like most people, the remake was more of my exposure to the original game. And like in the remake, it's all gonna depend, like what you said, Ren. The surprise is all gonna depend on which campaign you pick. I was more of a fan of Chris when I was younger, so I picked the Chris campaign. And it completely shocked me when Wesker was revealed, because I had never played any of the games where he was in. I had played Resident Evil 4 when I was way younger, so I hadn't, like, when I was 5, and I didn't even beat that game. I didn't even get past the village section when I was young. And so I went back and played the original game, the remake. And you know, there's always, in Resident Evil, there's always some hidden clues and everything. If you look around, some of the environmental storytelling also helps with it. But Wesker's entire turn is one of my favorite video game twists. It almost feels like a Saw twist in a few ways. With Saw, you know, the man getting up off the bathroom floor. That's what kind of Wesker's whole reveal felt like to me, especially playing Chris's campaign, because there's nothing in Chris's campaign that could allude you to that fact, unless there's like some hidden dialogue that I just completely forgot. But Chris's entire campaign is a lot more focused on other characters like Rebecca and everything, rather than Wesker, because Wesker just kind of fucks off with Jill, and like that's probably the suspicious thing is like, oh, they're both gone. Wonder where that happened. But it's like, I think the next time you see Wesker in Chris's campaign, it's with Lisa Trevor. And the first time that I played that fight, I'm pretty sure Wesker got knocked off, and I was like, oh, well, there he goes. There goes our captain. He's fucking dead. Great. And then it's just a complete 180 to see him back. Now, whether or not the follow-up to that was good or not is up to you. And whatever version of the twist you like is completely up to you as well. Because the twist itself is... I like how it was handled with the different scenarios as well. With, like, Chris gets a unique scene with Wesker and Jill gets a unique scene with Wesker. Like, Chris just, the laughing and everything. And then, Chris, stop it.
Oh my god.
But with the Jill scene, you get more of that drama that was built up from the dormitory scene, from the dormitory dialogue, as well as your encounter with him in the guest house. Which I think that when I went back and played the Jill campaign after playing the Chris campaign, that really tipped me off because there was no indication that he was ever there, and all of a sudden he's there. And then we find a secret entrance to a lab. So that sets off some big alarm bells, The original, like everyone has said, the characterization of Wesker is fucking abysmal. And so it's not really taken seriously. But in the remake, it's very sinister. Like, because you could chalk his demeanor simply up to the tough captain trying to keep his nerves going. But then with the pale face and everything, it's already a set off. With the pale, emotionless face, it's already a tip off. But I feel like more scenes could have been involved with it. I felt like with the Enrique scene, when he gets shot by Wesker, I feel like there should have been maybe an investigation into that. There should have been a little puzzle involved with Enrique's body, maybe to try and pull the bullet out. And like we find out it's a STARS. This is a bullet from a STARS handgun. So I felt like that could have been an interesting way to kind of lead more into that, because there's not much in the original game outside of a few choice scenes, but it's simply up to the fact that this was a game almost 30 years ago with a remake 22 years ago. So we're basing it off of modern day storytelling and a lot of hindsight. So I feel like back in the day, a lot of people were either really shocked or just, or it was like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I guess. There was no really in between, so, yeah.
All right, I really like that theory that it should have been a STARS bullet or something, because I think if you examine the body, it says something like, well, it was done by a professional. And it's either, at that point, you think it's either Barry or Wesker if you play as Jill, but then you get that examination. So it is like a spy on the team. I guess Enrico's dying words was like double crosser or something. Then you gotta guesstimate, oh, is he talking about Chris or somebody else? So it's like once you finally get the, silver lining, there's like a traitor in STARS, like at least by the caves, because I think he says something like he thinks Chris is the traitor first, then he tries to kill him.
Yeah. I feel like that scene also kind of narrows it down because only a few choice characters in the game disappear from the beginning and hardly appear. Because it's the Chris campaign where Barry disappears, and it's the Jill campaign where Chris disappears. And Wesker is the only one who really kind of disappears for good after the opening segment. Outside of, like I said, a few choice scenes, like Barry is still very prominent in Jill's campaign. So it's like, I guess looking back on it, you could, it would be pretty obvious looking back on it, but I feel like in the heat of the moment, you wouldn't know because we don't know where Chris is or we don't know where Barry is. This could be them, and it's like, and RE0 adds a lot more context to it, so.
But we're going to move on to the next two questions. You know what? I'm going to combine these two into one question because I think it makes better context and sense. So, what do you think about Wesker's history as an Umbrella researcher and his relationship with William Birkin, considering they're both researchers? Avian, I want you to go first.
You think maybe this time you give someone else?
Sorry, I'm just going by kind of the call order. But I can do it like in reverse. So Slash, I want you to go on this question.
Well, my exposure to RE0 is minimal, but like I did play through it at least once a while ago. I think on my PS3. I don't remember. But his relationship with Birkin really does set some stuff from Resident Evil 2 into play about like why Umbrella would be so hostile at him, especially after the mansion incident, where Wesker was essentially gonna betray Umbrella. I mean, that was his whole goal. He was never gonna work with them. It was his whole plan is to create a master race. Okay, Hitler. But I feel like they're two very different characters that are very polar opposites. Wesker's kind of the quiet, dramatic kind of dude. Meanwhile, Birkin is like the laugh in your face while he's doing it kind of guy. And Wesker's whole role as a researcher in Umbrella, it really makes his arc with making Ouroboros, it does make that believable somewhat. Because I feel like if they had completely skipped over him being a scientist, it would be like, where the fuck did he learn to, combine viruses to create a mega virus? And it's like, yeah, that photo in the lab was enough, could be enough, but I feel like without seeing some of the expertise that he could have, without knowing some of the things he worked on, we wouldn't get that much of an idea, because some of the things he worked on were highly advanced. As well as I think the remake of Resident Evil 2 dropping a little wink wink nodge nodges to Wesker being, I felt like that was enough to keep that relationship somewhat intact in the remake timeline. But his time as a researcher, I don't know, it's, like I said, it's very minimal, but it's enough. Now, because I do say, like, it's good to have that for like Resident Evil 5's arc, but I feel like it's almost necessary for it, because without that, I think they would have gone a completely different direction. Maybe like a very personal story where Wesker's not hell-bent on world domination, but instead like just wanting to kill Chris because big mad.
Yeah, it seemed like that was like an epiphany of, oh well, he meets Spencer, and now it's kind of like, oh, it's right to be a god, so I have to do that. But as a researcher himself, I thought it was fine for the most part. It kind of makes it a lot more interesting to see that Wesker is in eugenics and he's trying to get all these viruses to see how strong like either his force will become, or I think an interesting plot point was when he was trying to resurrect his own version of Umbrella, which not a lot of people really like sort of talk about, and that was like kind of a footnote until Tricell. So I was kind of a little bit baffled by that at first when you jump from RE4 to RE5 and you see, well, now it's just Tricell stuff or whatever. And I'm like, what happened to Wesker's own Umbrella? And it's like, oh, it's just this front for Umbrella. And then I really didn't like the plot point where he got bored of the viruses and sold them all on the black market.
Yeah, I feel like his entire Resident Evil 5 arc, Resident Evil 5 really seems like a mishmash of what they really wanted to do. Like, it's very tonally inconsistent, especially around the ending. Like everyone was saying, his ending is very weird for Wesker to do because he's never been about big monsters. He's been more his very secluded, very precise self. Even in his first boss fight in that game, he's very methodical with the 7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I have to play with you.
Hey, can I cut in real quick? Sorry, I feel like everyone's ignoring the biggest elephant in the room, that Wesker had enough of Wesker shit. Sorry, Wesker had enough of Chris's shit. Sorry, I meant the other way around. In Resident Evil 5, to a point where he said, fuck it, I will kill you no matter what. I just say, like, that's a big part of his characterization. Like, he had everything under control, and then Chris came in and fucked it right up. So he had enough of him.
That's ironic.
That's a good point.
Yeah, I can see that. I think it's just like, as fans, I don't know. I feel like we all had our like moments about what we wanted out of Wesker. So to a lot of people, it's just not what they wanted.
Yeah, I think it's just ironic because he does mention that, oh, should have killed you years ago. I didn't. And I think it's kind of just like a dramatic irony where it's like he kind of had Chris dead a lot of times in Code Veronica, but it's just mostly playing with his food. And that's kind of why Chris came back. He finally found something to counter Wesker with, and it's part of his hubris. Being too cocky led to that situation, which is 100% funny.
Yeah, and it's like, if he wanted to like go, if he says like, I should have killed you years ago, Chris, it's like, I felt like he could, because obviously in Resident Evil 5 he's holding back until like Ouroboros is ready, but it's like, at that point, why would you why would you bond with Ouroboros instead of, going full power? That just seems like the more logical way to go.
But I want to dive back into my stance on the question before I pass it to someone else. Again, like I said, him being interested in all of these viruses, pretty cool. It leads to one of the scenes I thought was awesome where he unleashed the hunter and he attacked Chris with it, and he was like just sending out these drones and all this other stuff in Code Veronica. So it shows that, he's well educated in these bioorganic weapons, as well as leading to what is essentially what gave Jill like kind of some powers in RE5, and her being experimented with the virus, which is a very interesting tidbit that we're going to talk about later with a later question. But his relationship with Birkin, I think is one of those things where you get two of these like scientists in a room and they're competing to be the best for what is essentially Spencer's like recognition. They were going out like getting people killed. They were there when James Marcus got like shot. It really felt like once you really got to know these two, they were probably some of the dirtiest scientists known to man, and that is what I really liked. I also like that they really had a problem with Alexia showing them up, because in the lore it sort of says that, where like Alexia came in and she was smarter than Birkin and Wesker combined, and Spencer was like, oh shit, I better look at this person. And then she got like, she had the accident, she supposedly died, cryo sleep, and Code Veronica came much later. So that's one of those things I'm hoping they integrate into later entries, later remakes later, is that sort of vendetta and jealousy that Birkin has. Um, but I think their competitive nature relationship, like, it's kind of hard to really think about it when you look back to it. Like, Wesker had someone that was a friend to him, and I kind of just wish he talked a little bit more about Birkin's death, or whatever. But since he's cold and callous, I guess you could think to yourself, well, his best friend is dead, business happens, move on. And that's kind of like just some cold-blooded shit. So now that I think about it, it's like, yeah, that's the nature of like the business to Wesker and everything involved. And I really kind of like it for his character, to be honest. But Ren Ben, did you go on this yet?
No, I did not.
Go ahead.
So I really like his background as a researcher, for a reason that we haven't really mentioned yet, which is it kind of, for me, it ties in with um him just being really damn smart, and not just the mastermind doing all these diabolical things, but he's also really smart. He knows the science behind these things. And also, if I'm not mistaken, that was also a part of his whole being in part of Project Wesker. Like, they, the kids that survived, like, he got to pick what he was going to study and what he was going to go into, and he picked virology. So it was a purposeful decision on his part too. As for his relationship with William Birkin, I think it's interesting, because I think even though they were friends, kind of like you said, Ren, there is that certain cold, there's that certain cold callousness to Wesker's character that I think, to a point as well, although they were friends, there was also a very, like, there was a competitive nature of being scientists, both trying to compete to see who can be the best. But I think there was also a bit of a mutually beneficial relationship between the two of them, because think about it, and we're going to talk about it later, I know, as well, but like, he let Birkin inject him with something experimental, which ends up working out really damn well in his favor. And like, you see it in Zero, where they're working together, where you've got Wesker's setting up his thing, and Birkin's like, no, I gotta do this. And like, you can tell that, like, even though they have some mutual goals, there's still that aspect of they do disagree on things, which I think is good. That is one thing that I did enjoy about seeing their interactions in Zero, is that you get to see that discord. And then I do also like, I'm glad you brought up Code Veronica, Ren, because that you also get to see that, because like, they both were very jealous of Alexia because she was smarter. From a very young age too. Like, that's the thing, like, that she was a lot of the things that probably they assumed that they were just the best at, and then along comes Alexia, who is way better, and that it has the effect that it has. So I do, and I say that, and I say that too about Birkin. He's not my favorite character. I do not like Birkin, but I do find that the dynamic between him and Wesker is very interesting, and I actually would like to see a little bit more with that, just because I feel like we haven't gotten to see as much of it as I think we could.
That is, yeah, it's very interesting to see what type of stuff and relationship like they are on. I just hope that, once again, that is the opportunity for later remakes to sort of explore and delve into as we progress. But Brandon, what do you think of this question with Wesker's backstory as a researcher and his relationship with William Birkin?
As far as the researcher side of things is concerned, I'm kind of like 50-50 on it, because on one hand, it's cool that He has some background in virology and all that cool stuff. But at the same time, though, they didn't do enough with it. Because Wesker is like the more in the business side of things ultimately. Because like he sold stuff to get money to get funded for his organization. He goes out pitch stuff to like these companies like TriCell to get their resources. Because I'm more willing to bet that TriCell is the one that ultimately made Ouroboros instead of him because they had the tools to do it more so than he does. So, with that in mind, like it's cool that he was a researcher or whatever though, but it doesn't add or take away with the context we have with Wesker because he's mostly a front man or a missions guy, right? So, but as far as his relationship with Birkin, I find interesting. Like it's probably like the only friend that Wesker actually had, right? Like even in Resident Evil Zero, right? No, you can see like Wesker was a bit more softer than he usually is around Birkin. And again, and if you guys play Umbrella Chronicles, they have some more scenarios involving Wesker. And there's a few more scenes with him and Birkin that again adds to the fact that he's being a bit more soft around Birkin. So I think it's pretty cool that he has some form of camaraderie with someone else, right? Because like in the day though, he always killing his friends, air quotes friends and business partners at the at the end of the day, right? So this is definitely a different side of Wesker that I can appreciate. Uh, and this is one plot point I'm surprised they didn't even try. I'm surprised that Wesker didn't even go out of his way to take Sherry from the government, considering one, she has the G stuff that gets her healing factor, right? And two, I'm like, okay, this is my friend's daughter, right? I want her to myself type of shit, right? Like, I can see Wesker doing that.
That was the wildest story that I am amazed they dropped in RE6 for Simmons, where originally I think it was going to be Wesker taking custody of Sherry or having some custody of Sherry, and then they dropped it for the Ada simp. And I was just like, dude, why? That would have been an interesting plot point, but you fucked it up. I just will never forgive Capcom for that one. I Simmons was not interesting enough to be Sherry's guardian. He was just not. And the game doesn't even barely mention it, so I think it was a waste. But Avian, what do you think of this question? Wesker's backstory as a researcher and his relationship with William Birkin?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. I, finding out throughout the series that he was basically shrouded in mystery, and born in an unspecified location, like all fucking cliche does. Knowing that he got recruited by Umbrella, he passed the tests that quickly rose through the ranks due to his skills and intellect, finding out that he pretty much planned the whole mansion incident to, like, he used his whole team as an experiment for the virus, to pretty much like cover up every illicit activity that was happening with the bioweapon researches and stuff, into finding out in Resident Evil 0, which personally one of my favorites because that's one of the games I started off with as well. His friendship with William Birkin just kind of like being this whole we're working on these viruses together and the goal is to gain control over the virus and the company with his own ambition for like global dominance, going into like Resident Evil 5, which he kind of starts to put that into fruition of global domination. Not in the best way, because when we go back to him acknowledging that he should have gotten rid of Chris earlier on, I don't think that was the case. Like, it may have been what his mindset was for the idea of the creation of the character at that point, but his reactions throughout the series kind of spoke differently. Like he still had a fondness for Chris, and that's what kind of like he still had his humanity, so to speak, and it wasn't 100% gone. And I feel that would have been a much better direction for them to go with, other than little, elementary school playground type of behavior between the both of them. And then all of a sudden it's just, I don't like you. You should have been dead by now. It kind of defeats the purpose of everything that had happened. Because, be honest, he could have killed Chris many fucking times. Sorry for my language. Like, many times he could have gotten rid of Chris, and he just didn't. Especially in Code Veronica when they were fighting. Chris got one good solid punch on him, and then all of a sudden Alexia pops up in her mutated form, and Wesker's just like, I believe this to you. You were one of my best. You could have still killed Chris. I don't know what the hell your purpose was at that point.
He don't want to get his hands dirty. That's all.
Yeah, right. Still,
he knew Chris could have done it, so like, yeah, I'll let you know on this, homie. But
yeah, but I mean, if you think about it, because obviously they're not going to show it in the game as you're playing, but in reality, I feel Chris would have been exhausted after the fight with Alexia, with all the dodging and weaving and stuff. That would have been the perfect time for Wesker to walk back into the room and, there you go, neck's gone, and that's that.
In fairness, though, he did climb a mountain prior, right? So, like, this man's built different.
He waited until the end to when the island was, being destroyed to kind of like fight, and then all of a sudden it's like, maybe next time. Bye. Why?
I wanna save this for the Wesker and Chris question, but because I feel as though like Chris's feats in Code Veronica are absolutely fucking crazy.
Oh yeah, big time.
He should have been tired, exhausted, all this other stuff, but his feats are kind of crazy in that game, so I want to save it for that.
Yeah, like clearly the same way. This is a bit of like a side note. The same way they kind of had the story where Jill was ill infected with the virus over the years, and it was treating her differently. They were kind of going in the direction of like how Wesker and the virus kind of coexist with one another. I feel some way somehow with the mansion incident, Chris as well was affected by the virus. Maybe not to the same extent as Jill was, but we gotta kind of explain the Boulder situation and his, unending stamina, or seemingly unending stamina that's kind of been throughout the series as like a funny trope. But yeah, Wesker, his time with Umbrella, his partnership with Birkin, kind of weird. That was a highlight throughout the series early on, and then just kind of like thrown under the rug as whatever. I never really cared for the dude anyway. Just doesn't make any sense. You don't spend as much time or do the things you did with somebody who's on the same playing field with you just to be like, I don't really care. Because if you don't, then you really are a special kind of evil, and you really should have accomplished the things you set out to accomplish. But he just threw everything out the window and still failed on top of that. Just demeans everything that started to begin with,
All right, we're moving on to question number 5. A pivotal plot point was Wesker dying by the hands of the tyrant and being revived by a prototype T-virus. This virus granted Wesker superhuman strength, speed, and agility. Do you think the series was made sillier by giving Wesker a superhuman virus? Yes or no? And I want to go with Ren Ben first.
Yes, I think it did make it sillier, but not in a bad way. Because already the fact that you're gonna bring him, like the fact that he comes back from the first game after being killed, like right in front of you by the tyrant, like that alone is just gonna be silly. So I appreciate the fact that that was added in there. or that is like what the story is hey, he got injected with this prototype virus, he had to die, that activated it, and that's what gave him all the superhuman strength, because like I said, you were gonna have that silly factor by being like, wait, this guy's dead, how is he coming back? Oh, he got injected by this virus. Okay, we're gonna lean into that now. We're gonna, his eyes glow now, and you know, he's got this going on and that going on, and oh yeah, he could dodge bullets and he could catch, you know, RPGs, and it's like, okay, it's silly, but I think it works in a way that only a Resident Evil game can make it work, and only the Resident Evil story can make it work, because that's something that I think the series has always had. It's always been like, there's always been serious themes. It's a horror game, so there's always going to be that serious factor. But one of the things that I really love about this franchise is the fact that they also incorporate you know, some silly things like Wesker's superhuman strength and his teleportation abilities and his super speed, and you know, then you've also, like, on the other hand, you've got like Leon, who's horribly traumatized, but then he's also like a snarky guy, and it works. And so even though I think it did make the series sillier, and especially like, I mean, and personally, Code Veronica Wesker is one of my favorite versions of Wesker, because he's so campy in some parts of that game, and I absolutely love it, because he's a horrible villain. He does horrible things, but he's also like out here bragging about how he's no longer human and look at all the power he's gained, which by the way is one of my favorite quotes. But I think that, anyway, so going back to that, like, the silly factor is there, but it works because of the way that they handled the writing around him, and the way that the games are, and especially the fact that he came back in Code Veronica, and that game has balances the serious and the kind of campy and silly and like, wait, what? In ways that I think even some of the other Resident Evil games don't. So somehow, even though it's silly, it works.
Slash, what about you? What do you think of Wesker having superhuman powers? Did it make the series sillier, or did it make perfect sense to you?
Well, this might be controversial, but I don't think it made the series any less or any more silly than it already kind of was. Because the series was already kind of silly from the beginning. I mean, partly due to performances, but some things were always going to be silly. That's just the nature of the franchise. Now, do I think him coming back from death kind of made it, like, kind of curveball the silliness? Yeah, a little. But his superpowers, I feel like like they're taken seriously enough, because his superpowers aren't used for like goofy reasons. His superpowers are actually some of the fucking most dangerous things I've ever seen in video games. I mean, the entire fight in Resident Evil 5's Lost in Nightmares DLC. That entire fight is probably one of the most painful fights to get through, but honestly one of the most serious fights to get through, despite the fact you were literally shooting Neo, who is dodging bullets like it's nothing. But I feel like that all comes with the stakes. Wesker's stakes outshine the goofiness of his powers, because this is a very dangerous man who's very capable of using these powers to their full potential, until he doesn't and decides to say, fuck it, let me do a downgrade. But we won't talk about that. But I feel like his entire like superpower set was kind of going to be there from the get-go, because I mean, we were already dealing with some very weird things, and I felt like there was eventually, in this silly ass series, there was gonna be someone with like the ability to dodge bullets so fast it looks like they're teleporting. Which, as a kid, that's what I thought Wesker was doing. I thought he was teleporting, which would have made it even sillier. But the super speed does kind of work because some of the monsters are really fast. And going back to the researcher thing, he knows how to use these powers because it's from a virus it's a prototype of a virus he's really worked on, so he really knows how to utilize them to their fullest potential. But I feel like the goofiness comes to the catching RPGs. I feel like that's where it gets a bit too campy for me. I feel like that's where that's where it goes from this is a little silly to okay, fucking Sam Raimi, chill it down, like calm down.
Oh man, where do I begin? Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'm in agreement with Slash. I think that in a series where we saw a man turn from a dinosaur to a cheetah and a fly again, Wesker's powers are just light in comparison to what we have seen. Oh boy. I even think his sort of non-canon ability in Zero where he could zap people with like an eye laser, that's a lot more ridiculous than the actual canon powers. um yeah, there's
the boulder punching.
that's also
that outdoes it.
That, yeah, normal humans can somehow do these feats that are incredible, and Wesker has like more of an excuse. Plot armor, yeah, plot armor humans, I will say. But yeah, at least in his credit for them giving him powers, it explains his abilities versus the others who, well, quite frankly, for lack of better words, they don't have these abilities. Super speed, monsters have speed. We've seen speedy monsters before. We've seen Jack Norman, who moves pretty quickly when he is mutated. So that's like not out of the realm of impossibility, as well as we've seen tyrants who pick up large like trucks like nothing, punch people through walls. We've seen all of this. I just feel like his powers are a big amalgamation, and they wanted to put that into like one solitary human being. And I guess in a weird way, I kind of like it because it 100% shows that they have made Wesker into one of the more dangerous BOWs. Like, that's something that I think should be built up a lot more in the series. Like, what is going to happen when all these people with powers and being BOWs and they're humanoids? What's going to happen when they get out of control and you can't manage people like this anymore? Which is very interesting if they head in that direction later in the timeline. But as for Wesker himself, I thought it was fine. I thought it was one of the better ways to bring him back, because I mean, let's be honest, if they brought him back as a normal human being, I don't think that would have worked as well. Like, it wouldn't have been as special. Like, what is so special about this guy that you revive him back from the dead to torment Chris or Claire? Oh, let's give him some weird powers, cat eyes. You don't know what the fuck's going on with that. And it harbors a lot more intrigue from Code Veronica than I thought it would. Wondering who he was and what this new rebirth meant for the character. So I like it. I'm one of the people that's on the side of team superpowers. I thought it worked really well for how they used it, and it looked very cool in RE5 in the cutscenes. No one can deny that. They made those cutscenes and those powers look awesome. So Brandon, it is your turn. What do you think of Wesker's powers and abilities?
Dope as fuck. Now, is the and within the context of Resident Evil, Wesker having his powers is quite frankly not unrealistic. The biggest stretch you could probably have is him, getting gored to the chest like a woman in a frat party. So like, you can say like him coming back from that is a bit of a stretch because like this man lost his fucking spine from that. Like, come on. All right, fair enough, right? You can say that. Maybe if it misses spine, then sure, maybe he just regenerate pretty well. But come on, yeah, it's fine. He shouldn't be walking for a hot minute from that. But that being said, we're living in a universe where we could create giant men in thongs, or trench coats, or trash bags, depending on your preference. Lizards, liquors, and God knows what else, right? Wesker having superpowers of his own volition is not the most unrealistic or out of pocket thing you can come up with. If anything, I would say Resident Evil 1 through Code Veronica is pretty damn tame compared to what we get from Resident Evil 4, 5, and beyond. Like Renegade pointed out, Resident Evil 6, you gotta do turn into a freaking transformer.
Did I just hear giant men in thongs? Hold on. Are we talking about
nothing.
The Beach Boy mod for Mr. X? Oh my god, dude.
There 100% is a mod for that.
Oh,
yes.
It has an umbrella on the front of it.
No.
It is the most powerful weapon umbrella ever created, alright?
No. Moving on to the next person. God damn
it. Kills you with its pure sexiness.
I'm clipping this part. This is getting clipped. Okay. Avian. Yeah, fuck off, Brandon. Avian, what about you? What do you think of Wesker's superpowers? Did it make the series too silly, or were you fine with it?
For the most part, yeah, I was fine with it. For him personally, actually really liked it and how it came to be. Considering everyone else in the series that has transformed, i.e. the golden boy of RE6, from, T-Rex to bone shooting cheetah to, sucky fly. Every enemy that transformed, that got their strength. What? Every enemy that transformed was like, that was the only way they got their strength, their power. Versus Wesker, he was the only one that kind of maintained that. Although his strength didn't compare to theirs, I feel it had more to do with the fact that he was still in his human form. So they had to kind of maintain the relevancy, the realisticness of, if a human was to become practically a super soldier, basically, how strong could we make this person before we get to the point of they have to become something else to surpass that? So for me personally, I feel they did a really good job with that, up until the point of RE5, where having to bond with Ouroboros and stuff like that kind of just went downhill after that.
There's something else I want to add real quick. And if you guys played what's it called again? Umbrella Chronicles, Wesker was fighting a pair of tyrants consistently, both before he got his powers and after the fact. Like, Wesker, with his power, became more effective killing machine, right? So like for him giving his powers, though, it made him into, in my opinion, a more interesting character because he stands out better compared to everyone else.
I find it funny that they decided to have that flashback scene where Wesker has no powers and he survives fighting two Ivans. I do remember that happening. And then I think the explosion separated them. So the fight the way they framed it, the fight kind of ended from the explosion, but the fact that it still happened is insane.
Mm-hmm.
So that is...
Wesker is a freaking freak. Like, he's built different. We could say that humans have unrealistic feats in Resident Evil, but like, no, they've been doing this unrealistic stuff since day one. Like, let's be honest here, though. If you and me were in that mansion fighting against a tyrant, he would have his way with us 5 ways from Sunday. All right, Birkin would eat us whole or cut us in half, depending on which form it is. Nemesis, well, that speaks for itself. So the fact that these characters could come out on top on unrealistic scenarios speaks more volumes about them more so than anything else.
I would not survive any of these incidents. I'd be turned to a piece of fried chicken. So it's just what's gonna happen, fam.
I mean, it might work. All you got to do is change your last name to either Redfield or Kennedy. You should be good.
I'm more of a Valentine type man myself,
Understandable.
You know that you could do that too. But we're moving on to the next question. We kind of talked a little bit about this earlier, but what do you think of the revenge motive between Chris and Wesker with their rivalry? And Brandon, I want you to go first.
Yay, I'm special. I will say this though, Chris and Wesker's rivalry is probably the best thing about the original series, at least the original set of stories, because they gave not only Chris a motivation to continue what he's doing at the time, right? And also he gave Wesker a thorn in the side, a terminal illness that you can't get rid of. Okay, hard. Okay, yeah. So that's probably my favorite rivalry because like no other character had a villain or a rival or something of any kind, right? Because Leon is like a villain of the week type shit, right? Jill, you could argue Wesker could have been also her rival though, but since we know that the canon route is Chris got him killed essentially, right? We know for a fact that no, it leans more towards like the rivalry between Chris and Wesker. That's more set in stone compared to Jill being part of that, right?
Yep.
So like when everything comes together with Cole Veronica, when him and Chris fight, Chris managed to at least outsmart him, outmaneuver him to get a good solid hit off him to a point where Wesker got dazed. Then again later on in Resident Evil 5, where the reason why Chris got so bulked up is because like he didn't want to be weak again when fighting Wesker. And to his credit though, he can push the shit out of him. So like yeah, like probably easily the best rivalry, and we never ever gotten anything close to that ever again.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that sentiment. It's a bit of layers behind it when you start to really think about it. Again, Chris's motive is that, well, he kind of killed my teammates. He stabbed me in the back. You tried to get all this stuff for combat data, which that's not cool. And to top it all off, like as it goes on more and more and more, you also beat up my sister, and that's not cool. So I can see why Chris is like super mad when you get to Code Veronica, because all that happens in the span of the same year, if you can like believe it or not. That is absolutely crazy when you think about the timeline in that fashion. All that happened the same year, just a couple of months apart. So yeah, that's still fresh on the mind for that rivalry to begin with. Wesker's motive is like, well, you ruined my plans. I was supposed to get all this stuff to Umbrella. The Tyrant was supposed to finish the job, but no, you destroyed it. So I can also see that developing as well. Not only the fact that, I mean, at that point they want to kill each other, and it gets worse in Code Veronica, and it just builds and builds and builds from there. I think due to the fact that it's long standing, it's something that sort of makes sense. They tried to do something like this for Leon and it didn't work, where it's like they tried to use the Gomez character, Maria, whatever her name is. She came back in the movies and then she died in the next entry, which is, again, it's not similar. What you have to do is you have to build this over time, let it fester, and between these games that we had with Chris and Wesker, it made sense. And Wesker's downfall to all this is true cockiness, thinking he's super better than Chris, stepping on humanity as much as he could. And then at that point, it was just like, that's when they introduced the little antivirus, Project W, or the PW, whatever they call it, RE5, the injection. Then it gets worse for him. So I think that it's great because we never had something like that before in any of the other games done well. Yeah, AW, it's a number 67, I believe. Yeah, it's really crazy how they did all this stuff. And it's escalation as well. 69. Fuck off. But I enjoyed it for the most part. I think one thing though if I wanted to see just more, I kind of wish that there was more games like centered around it, because it just kind of felt like RE5. It was the culmination, but I wish I had a little bit more time with these two and Sheva and everything, and the whole Jill thing and how that like sort of manifested. But I mean, I guess the ultimate goal was to, hey, I'm going to take away the partner that you care for, the person that you know had the most of a bond with. I'm gonna take Jill and I'm gonna mind control her, and that was like just some low down dirty shit that Wesker did. So I truly enjoyed it when you affect your loved ones and you show that you don't care. It's like no mercy for the other person. Then it makes the revenge even more valid, which is what Chris said in RE6. He said, oh, I think Jake asked him the question, oh, was it personal or was it just work? And he said, hey, it's both. It's both. I enjoy killing that motherfucker, and I enjoy getting paid for it too. So I pretty much liked how it all culminated in a sense. But next up is Ren Ben.
Hit on a lot of really good points, Ren. Especially because with these two in particular, the background goes back so far, and especially now that we've had more games and the Chronicles games and more lore added to things. You know, it kind of shows, like, you imagine that prior to the mansion incident, they were all working together, like they were all friends, they all knew each other, and you know, to have someone that you considered a friend kill your teammates, go, you know, put you in this harrowing situation where, you know, your life is in danger, and then to find out that it's this person that you considered a friend and that you know, you saw as your commanding officer, you know, the person that was in charge of your unit. And so from Chris's perspective, the desire to get rid of Wesker definitely makes sense. And I also really do love the fact that the absolute crap that gets kicked out of him in Code Veronica is essentially what makes him bulk up for later on, is because, you know, he's like, he didn't want to get beat up like that again. He wanted to win. And he still, like, even with the boulder punching level that he gets to, it's still not enough, technically. But I think the other side of that is also very interesting, because you've got Wesker's side of things where he has all these plans, and even like if you think about in RE1, when you get to the lab when you play as Chris, like he literally is like, "Oh, you made it. Well, of course you did. You're one of my men." Like he expected it. But then it turns out that not only did he expect him to get to that point, but then Chris kind of takes it a step further and essentially like messes things up. And Chris is always kind of there and messing up Wesker's plans in ways that Wesker may not have always anticipated, which I think is, again, kind of ties into that hubris that I mentioned earlier. Like, he gets cocky. He thinks that his plans, you know, he's the mastermind. And so it's an interesting rivalry between them, because they both want to get rid of the other, and the motivations are different, but they're forever going to be locked together because of that history that they have, because they were working together. There were other things, which oddly enough is actually one of the reasons why I really enjoy, it's such a short scene, but in Welcome to Raccoon City, when you see them all interacting in the office before Irons comes in and yells at them and tells, you know, sends them off to the mansion, like you see them all like joking around and joshing with each other, and like, you know, they're giving it, you know, they're like, Chris is like, oh yeah, you know, my favorite way to die is I want to die in Wesker's burly arms, and like I just love that, because I'm like, this kind it like, it's a movie and it's not canon, but it also kind of gives you an idea of what it might have been like before all that shit goes down. And you know, it kind of gives you a little more insight into where some of that essentially betrayal might have come from on Chris's part. And you know, I mean, it just I think it's a really interesting rivalry. I think And I know we've kind of said it, and other people have kind of hinted at it a few times, but I think that's why the way that Wesker killing off Wesker at the end of 5 actually, I think, hurt things, because that means you took away the ultimate rivalry. You took away what is essentially the person who put everything into motion for pretty much all the games up to that point. And it kind of has left us with a hole, which, like you said, Ren, they kind of tried to fill with Leon, but it doesn't work, because that same like deep-seated history and the deep-seated rivalry and the betrayal and all the other things, they're just not there in the same way that they are with Chris and Wesker. And I still think they kind of did a little bit of a disservice by removing that from things, because it does kind of take away an element that they just have not seemed to have been able to find a replacement for, since that element has been taken out of the story, so to speak.
Yeah,
Can I interject?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, see, I actually disagree with the notion of killing off Wesker was a mistake. For starters, though, it's Resident Evil. His days was numbered. It only mattered time before he was going to die, right? But one thing I will agree that they could have handled it a little better. Like, Solo 5, the way it is, still one of my favorites. But I do agree, like, Wesker's death could have been handled better. But ultimately, though, like, Wesker needed to die so that way the characters can move on. Because that's the end goal of, Chris and everyone else, to take down Wesker. They can't drag that out forever, right? I mean, if they dragged out Wesker versus Chris, the rivalry would have gotten dull over time, So I think that killing him off in 5 was the right move. Just could have handled it differently.
I think it was cool that they did the whole Civil War thing with RE6, where Leon and Chris fought. But the disappointing thing is that, well, it doesn't last for any more than 10 seconds, and logically, it probably wouldn't. So I just think that maybe that could have been a cool subversion of like expectations of having the characters go against each other that are heroes, but they don't do anything super interesting with it, and the villains have kind of sucked this whole time. So I don't know what they're gonna do to solve it. Either it's like you make someone else and you build him up and he's just as interesting, which they can do, they just really haven't so far. They kept everything personal. Or you could bring him back, which is what some people have been asking for, resurrect Wesker after all this time, or use Alex Wesker, which they have not yet. So they have options. It's just whether they're going to use it or not, it remains to be seen. But
I do think sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I do agree with you on Alex Wesker, though, because she was interesting, and I think I do agree with you on that.
Yeah, she's right there, but ever since Revelations 2, it's just kind of like, well, we're gonna keep her to the wayside for a good while, actually. But Slash, what do you think of this question? What do you think of the rivalry between Chris and Wesker?
Oh, well, damn, some people have said what I want to say. I will say that I think the rivalry spanning over every Chris game up until 5 was a very smart decision. I felt like that was definitely way better than, little girl, Mother Miranda. Sorry, I had to take a little jab at Village for a second. But I feel like the rivalry itself is well written for the most part. I think the aftermath of the rivalry is where the real bad stuff gets, because I feel like people are like, when a rivalry is finished, like when one of them is dead, there's no mention of it again whatsoever. And I felt like that was Resident Evil's biggest mistake. I alluded to this in the chat, but I felt like Resident Evil Village should have brought back what Chris was being built up as almost a villain. Perfect with the Wesker code and everything. I had felt like maybe they're gonna turn Chris into the new big bad, that all his time fighting like PTSD has drove him mad and turned him like Wesker. But no, it just ended up being a ruse for something else. And I felt like his Resident Evil 6 story should have been less about his amnesia and more about his trauma from the events of Resident Evil 5. I felt like that would have made a lot more sense than him immediately like jumping back into the fight after Wesker, and then just getting rocked, literally in the head. But overall, like the rivalry when Wesker was alive, I felt like it was one of the most petty rivalries I think I've ever seen as well. I mean, Wesker is out here kidnapping his best friend and turning him against him just because fuck it. Like, why not? Why don't I do this? This seems fun. And like the entire crux of Resident Evil 5 basing on Code Veronica, with Chris wanting to bulk up after getting essentially his shit pushed in by Wesker, because the only reason he survives that encounter is because Wesker doesn't want to kill him. He's simply there for T. Veronica and Alexia. And just the entire, like, hell, their interactions in Resident Evil 5 are some of my favorites between them. There's just so much deep-seated hatred that Chris has for Wesker, and Wesker's blowing him off like he's nothing, like he's a little toy. And ultimately, that's like Wesker's downfall. But the rivalry starting back, I feel like we need to have a bit of a I feel like we need to explore more like scenes with Wesker in the potential Resident Evil 1 remake, because there's not much of a rivalry there right now in the remake timeline, simply due to the fact Code Veronica isn't and probably will not ever get a remake. So I feel like they need to counteract that with more scenes between Chris and Wesker. And that's what I felt, going back to the original question about the turn. Back to the first question, or the second question about the betrayal. I felt like the following games do a lot better of giving Chris a reason to hate Wesker than the game with the entire reason he hates Wesker. Because Chris is seen as the main rival. However, some players will usually play the Jill route because it's a lot easier than Chris's route, and Chris doesn't experience all of that. Now, where the canon lies is kind of flip-floppy, kind of half Jill, half Chris, but still there might be a scene of Wesker doing something that could upset Chris, but it's like he's not some of that just some players just won't experience, so they're going to jump into Code Veronica where Chris has all this hatred, and they're going to be like, wait, what? And they've never played the Chris campaign of the original. So I'm really glad that Code Veronica really explored it a lot better, and then Resident Evil 5 really exploring it up until the boss fight, because the constant flashbacks during Resident Evil 5 to that night in the mansion, that was honestly my favorite part of 5, because it was always that little egging reminder. It wasn't too much, but it was enough to say, hey, remember, because you're in Chris's shoes, and what would you be doing in Chris's shoes? You'd be constantly reminded of that night you failed. And so he's replaying that in his fucking head, and it's getting him more and more pissed off, to the point that he bum rushes Wesker when he first sees him. Like he tries to bum rush him when they finally got him cornered. That's one of his first moves. And then Wesker just like takes it and like looks at him like, really? And then throws him around. And I haven't watched Welcome to Raccoon City, so I don't know how well the whole rivalry startup is there. So I can't really comment on it.
Please continue to not watch it.
I have no plan to. I did watch the original movies, and like they build up some kind of rivalry between Chris and Wesker, and it's just like, and it's like there's no rivalry there.
None of those
like,
movies are canon.
Yeah, but they're still adaptations. It's like, why is Chris and Claire even there to
The
fight
Anderson
Wesker?
movies aren't really much of an adaptation.
Yeah, they're not.
Yeah, true.
None of the Resident Evil movies are even close to like being connected to the game. The game is the actual plot, and the movies are just there for shits and giggles.
Well, the movies like why? I would say just why.
Yeah.
Only the CGI movies are considered canon.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, the CGI movies.
You know, it's kind of funny. I'm very surprised that the CGI movies didn't feature Wesker when they're so rooted in the past. That's kind of weird, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
That is
I
true.
aren't most of the past are like, I feel like the movies were trying to get away from Wesker, which is what I started with, was the whole problem where Resident Evil kind of went down a little for me, because Wesker was outside of, you're Wesker Jr., aren't you? There's not much mention of him after that. And like I said, it would have been so cool to see, to instead of having the mold or some bumfuck bald dude who has a hard on for Ada so much he creates a clone of her. It's like, I felt like instead of all that, we could have gotten the aftermath of Wesker's entire reign on essentially on top of the world. Wesker's entire, like, the effects he's had on people and everything. Jill's completely forgotten. I mean, Jill hasn't appeared in a major thing. Death Island was her first major appearance since Resident Evil 5.
Yep.
And that is honestly such a disservice to that kind of character, because that's one of the most affected characters. And Chris himself, like I said, he's almost put Wesker in the back of his mind, outside of wearing a fucking coat that looks like his. And even then, it doesn't go anywhere, because he's not turning into Wesker. He's simply just trying to look cool. And I feel like that defeated the purpose of the whole build-up.
I do
And the
agree.
rivalry, the rivalry should have turned supernatural after that. If you were going to go kind of supernatural with some of the visions and everything in 7 and 8, you should have had maybe a scene with Chris, a PTSD scene with Chris, where he's seeing Wesker everywhere, and Wesker continues to taunt him even in death. I feel like that is your perfect way to revive Wesker without actually reviving him. Keep him in Chris's mind, almost like a Batman Arkham Knight with Joker. Kind of like that. I know people don't like that, but I like that. And I would love to see something like that. Because Chris's hatred for Wesker is so rooted in his head that he couldn't get out of it. It couldn't leave his body, even when he was like on vacation.
I think it's crazy that RE6 like gave him amnesia too. So like even playing with that might be lost in a remake unless they change it fully.
I think if they remake Resident Evil 6, they just get rid of the amnesia angle altogether.
Yeah.
I think it should just be a whole PTSD from Africa, because Resident Evil 5 is probably one of the most traumatizing experiences any of the characters have gone through up to that point.
I don't know. Chris had a good time there. If anything, it should be the trauma or the guilt from losing his team earlier, not him losing his memory.
Yeah,
that's where his drunk or stupor should come from.
Yeah, and it's also like a lot of revenge stories play on the trope that revenge isn't always going to solve all your problems.
Oh, in this case, it will. That man needs to go.
In that case, it fucking will. PGs to the guy who fucked you over. Ooh, that'll certainly do it. But it's like when Chris was brought back for the newer games, I felt like hell, just the overall like, because Chris's rivalry wasn't even just with Wesker; it was with the entirety of Umbrella, just like Jill. So like him as eventually working with an Umbrella PMC, a rebranded Umbrella, just didn't even feel right. And everyone will say, "Oh, but they addressed him how it doesn't feel right," and it's like, yeah, but that doesn't negate that. Like it still doesn't feel right that he cares about these people who were willing to. It doesn't make sense that he's willing to care so much about these people that are fully committed to serving the same corporation that ruined his life. I don't like that's not how the real world works, people. Just because Umbrella is gonna say, "Oh, we've changed our ways. We want to stop bioterror." That's not magically gonna take away Chris's entire hatred for what that corporation did to him and his team. Because people forget that Wesker wasn't the only responsible party. It was Umbrella in its entirety. So much. I mean, Lost in Nightmares proves that they're going there to find Spencer. They're not going there to find Wesker. They're going there to find Oswald Spencer. And oh fuck, I'm sorry. I just hate a lot of post RE5, despite the fact I love 7 and 8.
Yeah, it's either now they're trying to build up new corporations or we're stuck lingering wondering what they're gonna do. I want to believe that RE9 is going to solve a lot of these questions, but I guess that remains to be seen. But they definitely should have had some sort of more traumatic events of what happened with Umbrella and Wesker's like aftermath of the world and the characters. I think that would have been a more interesting RE5. But um, Avian, how do you feel about this rivalry question? If you want to go on it.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, everybody's already said everything already. Just yeah, I don't really have much to add to it. It started off at the mansion, finding out that the betrayal of what was going on, it kind of was supposed to be what deepened the hatred between the both of them when it was revealed that, Wesker orchestrated the events at the mansion, testing the T virus on his own team. Uh, Chris and Jill discovering the betrayal and his true intentions kind of marked the beginning of their personal vendetta, which drove the whole thing to be what it was. Chris going against him again in Code Veronica after everything that was happening, finding out that he was still alive. Resident Evil 4, some of that kind of playing out in Leon's story, where Leon didn't face him directly, but was a victim of Wesker's antics and kind of suffering because of what Chris kind of didn't finish early on, all the way into Resident Evil 5, leading into this whole orchestrated play of, bioterrorism and all that stuff, and world domination, and yeah, kind of just moot at that point.
Well, we'll move on to the next question, which is, well, still talking about evil stuff and evil moments. So, what is the most evil and diabolical thing that Wesker has done within the whole series, in your opinion? Brendan?
First?
Yeah.
Injecting that woman in RE5 with Ouroboros.
Solo?
Yes. That's the worst thing he has done.
Nah.
How dare he? How dare he do that, man, bro? Like, that was easy ass he could take there. God damn.
What the hell? Wait a minute.
You fucking simp.
No.
Oh my god.
Bro, I couldn't say it with a straight face, man.
Yeah, oh my god. Dude, Excella.
Burn him. Simp.
Excella is the dumbest idiot of all time. Oh my god, dude. I saw it coming from a mile away, too.
Okay, to give an actual answer, I will say this though: him affecting either like large populations with whatever virus he has, because I'm pretty sure he's the reason why the prison was went to shit. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one. That and what he did to that part of Africa, at least had a hand in it. Like those are the worst things he probably could have done. Now, the absolute worst thing that could have happened is, of course, nuking the planet with tentacle monsters, and the rest of history with that one.
I'm sorry, what, hentai? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, he about to turn we'll open that shit, man, with those hentai monsters.
Why'd you have to say ooh like publicly? What's wrong with you?
I'm gonna get the bonk stick.
Look, man, I been bonked so hard in my life, I'm immune to it. Can't stop me.
Well, I guess I'll go next real quick. So yeah, if he would have succeeded in Ouroboros, the entire world would be affected, tentacle monsters, and the population would go down to 0. So that's the worst thing he probably could have done. I'm gonna go with a personal sort of favorite, I guess, in a morbid, fucked up way. But I would say his experiments on Lisa Trevor is probably one of the more diabolical things in my opinion, because number one, he's experimenting on a child and not caring. That's like the worst that you could probably think of, as she slowly degrades into a creature, and you see the G virus and the eyeball come from her back, and I'm just like, oh, this is super sickening. And they were there like knowing that, hey, after this we're gonna have to dispose of the child and kill it because we gotta get rid of it, failed experiment. So that was like a really messed up thing of them supervising this whole infection from Lisa Trevor, in my personal opinion. But slash evil and diabolical moments of Wesker, what's the worst thing you think he's done?
Oh, it's a good question, because Wesker, in my opinion, has done some of the most diabolical things in gaming history. The torture and mind bending of Jill, simply for petty reasons too. Like, I've never seen someone brainwash like the best friend of someone else simply because it might piss him off. That's some next level hater shit right there.
And he did experiment on her too, which could potentially killed her if she didn't have antibodies to block out the experiment. So yeah,
that could have happened. I don't know. God, it's really hard to pick, honestly. It really is, because you can look at the Lisa Trevor situation, which Wesker had a hand in, and it's already tragic in and of itself. But it seemed like that was also a company-wide effort as well.
That's true. If
I'm not mistaken.
I guess it's more of a, you can say guilt by association as well. Everyone who knew about that and sort of just condoned it, you could say all of them are fucked up people. But they also aided in the disposal efforts, which is probably also not morally good.
Yeah. I might not even go for some of the acts that he might have done to other people, but I'm actually going to go off one of his speeches after he kills Spencer. I would say the fact he himself deemed deemed himself of having the right to be a god over anyone else might be some of the most diabolical shit he's done, because his ego has reached such high fucking levels of I can do whatever of literally Homelander, I can do whatever the fuck I want. And just it essentially just I feel like it's less what he says and the implication of what he can do by him saying that. Him claiming to be a god means that he's essentially got all judgment over everyone. Everyone and everything is under his judgment. And that is a terrifying thought due to his entire plan. I mean, ooh, God, even then, I'm not even sure if that's the one I want to pick. Fuck. Giving birth to a son is pretty fucking abysmal, because that son's one of the worst plot points in the fucking franchise.
Oh my god.
It's so funny because it reminds me of fucking Virgil. It's like, dude's got a plan, but then he says, but wait, that booty first. And I'm just like, oh, what? Like, you stopped your plans to make a kid?
I'm gonna save that for number 9.
Yeah. The brainwashing of Jill is already pretty bad. The whole situation of the mansion incident is also really bad. God, I do wish I could say this if it was Wesker who initiated this, but God, if it was Wesker who sent the PMCs after Birkin, I would have loved that plot point if that was a thing that they would do, because it would have further it would have further proven like he's capable of doing anything at this point, simply due to the fact that he thinks he's worthy of everything by killing Birkin, stealing his work, and then incorporating it into his super deadly megavirus. But I don't think that they would ever have the balls to write something like that, because then it just creates some plot holes, because at that point he's technically supposed to be in hiding, and Chris is looking for him at the same time, so why would he still be in Raccoon City while there's a nuke about to go off? I don't know. I guess my full answer would be there's no fucking choice you can make that would seem more evil than the others, because they're all the most evil things this man has done. He's a walking Nazi, for fuck's sake. So, yeah.
Ren Ben, what about you? Most evil thing Wesker has done?
So I think for me, because he has done a lot of really awful things, so it is hard to pick one, but the first one that springs to mind is the experimentation of brainwashing on Jill, because and I think why I would pick that one is because we get to see the effect it has on her. And I really liked that they did bring that up in Death Island as well, because, and she kind of touches on it in RE5, like she's like, I was coming after you guys, but I was aware of things the entire time. So essentially, she was not in control of her body. She just basically had to be a prisoner in her own mind and watch herself try and kill, this person that she's known for decades. To watch, to help, what was his name, Irvine. Like she had to basically be a prisoner in her own mind And on top of that, it was like literally Wesker kind of got lucky in getting her because he didn't go out with the intention to capture her. He got lucky and she pushed him out. She grabbed him so that he wouldn't kill Chris, and they fell out the window. And Wesker got lucky in that she had been infected before. She had the antibodies, and oh, lo and behold, it happened to be what he needed to be able to do, to be able to do what he needed to do. But yeah, I think that's part of why. But then going back to when they touch on it in Death Island, like she reiterates that again, because yeah, we didn't see her for 5 years, but that would fuck up anyone, like going through that, being forced to like essentially be a prisoner in your own mind and watch yourself try and kill your friends, watch yourself kill all these people, watch yourself do all these things, and like the amount of like therapy and everything that she probably had to go through during those 5 years. That's why we didn't see her. And she touches on that in Death Island, and she says, she talks about and it's very brief, but she talks about what that was like and what effect that's had on her. And I think that because we get to see those things and we get that additional information from her, that somehow makes that a little bit worse for me because of everything that happened to her and the fact that we get to see the aftermath of that, essentially. Because I think, though, I will say a very close second for me is actually Excella, but not for the same reason. Here's why I think what happens with Excella is even more fucked up and even worse than just the fact that, obviously he turned on this person who thought that she was his partner in crime. Don't ask me why she thought that, and here's why. Because if you look at the pile of bodies that is essentially there for her to absorb once she gets infected by the Ouroboros, they're not people from the ship. Like, they brought people from the village, from Kijuju. Like, they're villagers. And it's so, like, that's why to me with her, I'm like, how did you not see this coming, honey? Like, seriously. But it's even more fucked up because, like, he planned that from the beginning. That was not something that he was like, oh, you know what, I'm going to turn on her. He planned that from the beginning. And I can't remember, somebody pointed that out to me, though, about the people, like the big pile. And I was like, oh my God, they're right. That's wow. Wesker, that's wow. I'm not sure what words I have for that. Probably most of them are not podcast appropriate. But yeah, so those are, and I mean, then of course there's the mansion incident, there's the countless major populations of people around the world that he's caused infections for, and he is a person who, I can't remember exactly how Chris said it, but Chris was like, Wesker only looks out for Wesker and what Wesker wants to accomplish, whatever that may be. And I think that's why, even though I pointed out 2 particular ones, it's really hard to pick one thing that is the absolute worst that he has done.
Avian, how about you? What do you think of the most evil and diabolical thing Wesker has done in your mind?
Yeet. For me personally, the most diabolical act for Wesker, the most heinous, I would have to say, is his manipulation and the use of the T-virus to cause devastation for Raccoon City. Mostly because that's what we're introduced to. And I just feel it's pretty messed up and shows like you're the lowest of the low. I can't say what he did after that in Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5 is bad as well, because everything is kind of self-explanatory from day one. The fact that he's willing to kill millions in a small city speaks volumes all on its own. His plan to release the T-virus in Raccoon City was both not only an experiment, but a means to cover up Umbrella's activities. And if you're willing to cover up what your company did instead of taking responsibility, also shows how much of a shitty person you are. The virus outbreak led to the city collapse, death of innocent people, like as I've already said. Later on, his actions became a little more egregious as he seeked to spread bioweapons on a global scale. To have his final confrontations with Chris and Jill, reveal that his twisted ideologies kind of drive him into more of a godlike power. You're delusional at that point, much more than we thought, and you're completely lost and there's no saving you. So I would say the beginning of everything, the most diabolical thing he's ever done is the T-Virus, the Mansion, and Raccoon City.
All right, and we're moving on to the next question, which is a plot line they introduced into RE5, but it is called The Wesker Children, where they took basically they tried to say that Wesker was part of this eugenics program the whole time to create a superior race of human beings. And because of this injection, I believe that 11 Wesker children died in the process and only 2 were remaining, which is Alex and Albert himself. What do you think of this whole plan, this backstory, how he became superhuman and artificially manufactured, and Spencer's involvement as well, because that's an important piece of the puzzle? I will have Ren Ben go first.
So I thought it was an interesting angle. Oswald Spencer is he's an interesting character because and in some ways, for as evil and horrific as the things are that Wesker does, Spencer is his own special brand of evil, because not only did he start all these corporations, he was doing the virus research and all these things, competing with his own collaborators. But he essentially created this program that was eugenics for kids, where it was, we want to have the smartest, basically the best cream of the crop humans come out through this program. And he did it by injecting them with the progenitor virus and just waited to see who survived. And that's where we get Albert and Alex. But I mean, it's an interesting storyline. I feel like it would be interesting to find out a little bit more about it, but like I said, at the same time, it's essentially experimenting on kids, and I can kind of see why they might not want to dip into that particular brand of awful. But yeah, I think it's an interesting storyline, and I think it also does kind of give more context to who Wesker is as well, because he essentially got either kidnapped or his parents were paid off for him to be, to go to Spencer's program, to go into this, Wesker Children program, to go into the Project W. And I think it does kind of explain a lot about why Wesker has some very grandiose ideas about himself. Because if you think about it, if you're put in this program and you're told from a very small age, you are the best, you are the smartest, you are the cream of the crop, you're kind of sowing the seeds for some of the ways that he sees the world, as a later on as a teenager and as an adult, by doing that. But I do still think is a very fucked up thing to do. The whole idea of doing that is having that the Wesker children is just wild. Also, I did find it interesting that Wesker actually just came from the name of one of the researchers on the program, because I always wondered why Wesker, and then I found out it was just one of the guys that worked on the program. But yeah, so that's kind of my take on things with that.
Also, you are right. It is named after the previous eugenics researcher, Dr. Wesker. I thought that was fascinating too, because they took his name and they just put it on this project of all these other Wesker kids and adapted it in a sense. But I guess I'll go really quickly. So I'm kind of I'm kind of a little bit 50-50 about this. I feel like this plot point was always intended to set up another Wesker in case Albert died, which is true in the case of Alex, because every single person that I know before Revelations 2, when they saw that friggin' file that one more Wesker was out there, everyone was asking questions. That's the point of that file, especially when you start to play Lost in Nightmares and you figure out that someone took Spencer's research and they hauled ass. And allegedly they was working on like immortality to keep Spencer alive, so that's when people ask more questions. As for the plot point itself, again, like I said, I think it was done to set up more Wesker afterwards. One thing I don't like though is that they kill the remaining Wesker children. I always said this before, I'll say it again. I think it would have been cooler if they kept all 11 of them alive, and then the mystery is like, well, oh shit, he ain't the only one out there. So after he's dead, there's Derek Wesker, there's Hero Wesker, there's a ton of them out there, and we don't know who they are or where they're at or if they are prone to virus immunity or not. Because the main thing was some of the Weskers that took the virus, they either got superpowers or they didn't. I know Alex didn't, her condition got worse, but Wesker's did not. So that's the main thing you will be asking in the back of your head: who is better and who is prepped for superhuman?
Can I go next if you know?
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ren. Like on paper, like the Wesker project is very interesting. Hell, it's so interesting they made a whole series out of it. With that in mind, I do agree they should have kept most, if not all, the children alive. Because with the revelation of there's more of you out there, are you as bad as this one? Or are you better than this one? Because right now it's just Russian roulette. As we know, Alex is almost as bad as him, right? And I love the misconception. It was everybody thought that all the Wesker children were male, which the file did not say that. I'm sure Rain will remember this conversation from years ago with another person that said that.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the file did not say that all the Weskers were males. It just said there is Wesker children. That's it. So the idea of a female Wesker being plausible is very interesting and I guess different because like why not? We need more female villains in the series.
Yep.
I just wish Alex did not let's say chicken out at the end and try to infect herself, because like ultimately though she did experience fear, and which is why she became that monster. I'm not sure that was her plan or not because I haven't played Revelations 2 in a while, so I don't remember the story verbatim. But ultimately though, I think her becoming what she was at the end of the game was way too soon. She could have been the next setup for, say, Claire, or bring Jill back in, or whatever, right? When she heard that there's another Wesker, bring her back into action. But hey, they fumbled the bag on that one, though. I can't front.
Well, Slash, it is your turn. What do you think of the Wesker children plotline from RE5?
I mean, not much was done with it after the fact. I think the plotline itself is really interesting. It essentially gives you more villains to kind of introduce, but at the same time, I think you risk ripping off something. Because for me, it's not the exact same thing, but it does feel very Brainiac-y. If anybody knows about that, it just feels a lot like Brainiac from DC. And it really gives off the Metal Gear Solid inspirations almost, with a project made to create like super soldiers and everything, with some of them being stronger than the others and others being a lot weaker than the others. But I feel like the plotline needs to be explored more for me to really have an opinion on it. I mean, it's a very evil plotline. Like it's a very evil project. It's some of, I mean, just like Ren said, she said that it's not something that they might touch on simply due to the implications of it. And from what I know, child violence is a good way to get your piece of media banned in all around the world. So like we're not really going to see much of it. We might get like flashbacks akin to like Hitman Absolution's flashbacks to Agent 47 as a child. But I don't know. With Alex nowhere to be seen, I just don't feel like they're gonna. I don't feel like they're gonna work on that plot line again, unless like Resident Evil 9 somehow brings Alex back in a new form, which I doubt, because it would seem they've completely dropped the Alex Wesker plotline from Revelations 2 in favor of the mold and the BSAA Civil War. So again, not much to say on it. Now Spencer himself, there's a lot to massive piece of shit. In all honesty, a lot more evil than Wesker in some way, simply due to the fact that he created him. And I felt like Wesker, knowing that he was manufactured, had he already had a lot of reason to kill Spencer, but I feel like that was what finally pushed him over the edge. He always thought that like he was just born best. He thought he was the best. But the fact that he finds out that his augments, like he's just augmented, they're all artificial, is what pisses him off more than anything. And it's what drives him to do more evil shit, to create Ouroboros and create his own master race. Because he just found out that, oh yeah, if we didn't pick you, you wouldn't amount to anything. And that would really mess with someone like that. It's very akin to The Boys, where all these superheroes are they're just picked out of a random lottery as children to be tested on and then turned into manufactured celebrities. And it's the same with Wesker. He was just a little kid taken presumably from somewhere and then experimented on to the point that he was unrecognizable, probably unrecognizable from his original self. I mean, his features are so unnatural, I doubt that is what he looked like, unless he was actually a biological creation of some sort. But I don't see that being anything. Because again, he's pale, he's emotionless in that original game. Like, just doesn't feel like unless he was just born that way, that project had to have fucked him up a lot. So
yeah, I think the original plan was all the children were kidnapped and they were people with superior DNA that can handle the viral injections. Which is still kind of rather fucked up when you really think about it, but still. Um, it's just Wesker's dialogue is kind of confusing when he says, "Are you saying I was manufactured?" But no, is Spencer just searching for superior humans to rid the world of chaos and have them under his beck and call? I do remember that they had to follow Spencer's order, and if anyone was defiant, which is what Spencer feared, they basically would not be good for the program. So they had to be kept under a really, really tight leash before the truth was thrown out there. But Avian, how about you? What do you think of the Wesker children storyline?
Well, that's the third time I got. Wait, wrong chat. Fuck. So what I think is they kind of dropped the ball with the whole thing, because they could have went in the direction of, okay, Wesker is dead and Alex is dead, which I agree with the earlier comment. They dropped the ball with that as well, doing it way too early. They could have left options open to do this ordeal of, hey, you may have gotten rid of these main Weskers, so to speak, but there's literally a whole army behind the scene that you know nothing about, kind of causing Chris, Jill, the whole RE team basically to question if what they're doing is even putting a dent in stopping the bio weapons from spreading and all the things that's happening right now, going into the fall of finding out in Resident Evil 8 Village, spoiler for anyone who hasn't played yet, which you probably should have by now or seen it, finding out that BSAA is actually a piece of shit this entire time. There's so many ways they could have just been like, hey, we got a whole army of Weskers. They're much worse than Albert and Alex. You got a whole thing coming your way, like a whole shit show. Instead, they kind of just was like, all right, well, Albert's dead. Let's tie up, a few loose ends, get rid of Alex while we're at it. And yeah, we'll just figure out where we're going from there, Like, they didn't even have to kill Wesker off, in my personal opinion. I still feel like Wesker could have been the main driving point with everything. Like, yeah, Resident Evil 8, you find out who really was behind finding out about Ouroboros, basically, like the whole Las Plagas type of situation. It's like, oh, it was Spencer and it was, Miranda. Cool, not a problem, but Wesker was kind of pushing everything to be more than what it was early on before we got that story. And you could have had him as like the main bad guy for the entirety of everything. So you could have did the same thing that he was doing in RE4, where he was in the back seat and not really doing anything, just calling the shots, setting things up, and kind of just showing up at the end to, tie up his few loose ends the way he did with Ada, which I like how they did it in RE4 Remake. A lot better than him just being behind the scenes, saying a few words, and then that's kind of it, if you played separate ways. RE5 could have been the same. He's behind the scenes. You could have allowed Chris and Jill to get a little bit closer to him the way they were towards the end after he did what he did with Excella and stuff like that, but not allowing them to get to him to the point where everything kind of turned into what it was. Allow him to escape again and kind of dish out an even bigger plan that does force all of them to kind of work together to have no choice but to stop him. But they didn't really do that. They were just like, let's just get rid of any Weskers that exist. And any more opinions I have right now kind of goes into the next question that we got to talk about revolving little Jake man.
Oh boy, but before I get into that, I just want to cap this question off with a little bit of context. So I said this in chat and I'll just repeat it. In a way, with Spencer and the involvement, it's very important because Wesker is kind of living out Spencer's like dreams. He wanted an advanced race of human beings to take over the world. When it got to that point in Lost in Nightmares where he goes to the Spencer estate and he kills him, Spencer already kind of gave up at that point, but he knew that the only one to probably carry on a plan like that is Wesker, because once he kills him and he tells him, the truth and everything, his whole philosophy like changes. Now it's like full steam ahead, Ouroboros. So in a way, Spencer kind of was trying to get the last laugh, but he was using Wesker as a result. So it's a weird, twisted way of how that storyline progressed, because remember, Ouroboros is meant to breed a superior race of human beings and select them. Whoever is the strongest will survive and the weak will perish. It's pretty much the same thing that Spencer wanted. So that's why I think it's a very interesting simile in how it's done and what he wants to do. But we're going to move on to the next one, which is Wesker Jr. Oh my god.
May I go first?
Oh yeah, I was actually gonna ask to go first. Also,
Yeah.
Ren, did you answer the last question?
I did. I said I thought it was 50-50. It was well done in some areas, but I also didn't like how they killed a lot of the Wesker children off. That's what I said.
Yeah. Oh no, I was asking Ren.
Oh,
sorry.
Ren? Oh.
Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
I just wanted to answer the next one first.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna it. So my thoughts on it is it didn't really make sense, especially once I got more context that it was not necessarily the original intention for the character. I don't know. To me, it just, especially because you watched in Resident Evil 5, if you watch in Resident Evil 5, like Alexa comes on to him hard. She is really trying to she's trying to get in those pants. But he clearly is not interested. So it was really weird for me. It was really weird. Sorry, I just read that. It was odd to me to then come into RE6 and be like, oh no, he had a son with some random lady in Europe. And I was like, did he really though? Like, how does that make sense? Like that just, it didn't make sense to me. I think they could have handled it better. But in general, it didn't really make sense to me. It just, I don't know. It felt very forced, and I didn't like that about it. I don't mind Jake. Like Jake himself is fine, but I think it could have been handled differently, and I still don't. I don't buy that he just decided to do it with some random lady in Europe and had a son. Because I don't know, it just doesn't seem like something Wesker would do. It seemed out of character. But yeah, so that's my opinion on that.
Well, Avian, do you want to go next or let Brandon go?
I'll go next. Yeah.
You can go next after him, Brandon.
I agree with Ren because it seems Japan has a way with putting it out with their bad guys that they kind of like to hit it and quit it, you know, on the side. Virgil. But with the story doesn't make sense. If they had it in a sense where they made it more, hey, Wesker only conceived the child specifically because he wanted a successor, I probably would have bought that more versus, oh, random child just appeared out of nowhere and now he's a bastard child who grew up to be a mercenary for hire and blah blah blah. Regarding Jake, I actually love Jake. Like the story in RE6 with him and Sherry was one of my favorites. Because I mean, I love Leon the most at the end of the day, and that was like my go-to story. But to play with Jake and understand his side of the story, I fell for him. I just feel they could have done more with him, revolving around, you know, meeting up with Chris. Like I understand they had a little moment that, you know, the creature was about to be released. They're on the thousands of leagues under the sea, so to speak. Sorry, no copyright infringement. Didn't mean to. But they realistically could have done more. You know, they could have continued his story instead of doing their reboot, so to speak, with RE7. You know, coming into play, they could have given him a bigger story in stopping all the badness instead of just like, oh, he's here and now he's just a footnote in the history of RE. It would make more sense that he kind of is the turning point to everything that's going on with finding a cure and stuff. Maybe not having his blood be the cure, but curing what was out already. Like, not, don't let it stop the Ouroboros or the Las Plagas. Let that be its own thing. Like, the Las Plagas could be way too powerful that his blood cannot, purify it. But it can stop everything else that was manufactured in the Umbrella, labs. So like the T virus, G virus, all that stuff can be stopped. To wrap it up, I just feel like, again, they could have done more. They didn't. They just left it. I would definitely like to see Jake play a bigger role, or at least have them bring him back. When RE9 was announced, and the characters for that game were like juggling back and forth between Jill being the main protagonist, Leon's gonna be the main protagonist. I kind of wish like they would have just been like, hey, curveball, Jake's gonna be the protagonist. We're gonna put more fucking story and more lore into his shit. That would have probably been cool.
Brandon, it is your turn.
All right, where to begin? Yeah, so Wesker having a child out of left field is not the first time this happened in Capcom's history. Fortunately, if you're a Democrat fan, you know. I don't have a problem with a character having a child, but it needs to have logical sense to it, like good context to it. Because I forgot who said it. Everyone, I think he said this. Like, if he wanted a successor or something to pass his bloodline on, to have a kid, sure, makes sense, cool. But it was not properly explained. It was just like out of nowhere, that kind of shit. It's literally Democrat fart all over again. But anyway, with that being said, though, I actually do like Jake a lot. Yeah, it's fun to have a character that is actually, for the most part, superhuman or at least enhanced enough to do all the wacky shit that most characters can't do. I could beat up Usonex with my bare hands and actually get away with it. You can't have that much more fun with any other character in Resident Evil 6. You can't tell me otherwise. That being said, though, I really wish the Capcom did not drop the ball with him or just not use him again, because he has so much potential to do a lot more. They could have probably toned down some of his angst a little bit, because I'm pretty sure that would turn some people off. Like Evian said, like they probably should have brought him back for Resident Evil 8. Like Chris was going to be set in stone in it, right? He could have had, hey, yo, Jake, can you do me a favor? Can you watch over Ethan and make sure nothing happens to him, right? That could have been a great plotline, because like Ada was originally going to be in Resident Evil 8, but they cut her out for some reason. Which, in my opinion, that was a mistake, because it would have been interesting to see how Ada would interact with Chris, considering what happened in Resident Evil 6, right? Because if Ada infiltrating a like a cult again, it's for a particular reason. So it'll be interesting to have her in there as well. On top of that, though, imagine if Jake was there with Chris, back him up during the village siege, trying to get Ethan's child back. It was just missed. This is just a common problem with Resident Evil. They either drop plot lines, kill characters, or drop characters. Like Billy Cullen. We haven't seen that man in 20 years now? What happened to him? Is he a tyrant now? Like, what's going on? Is the memes true?
His name is Hank East, and he's teaching in a school.
Oh my god.
You said Hank, and I thought of Dead Rising.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the joke.
Oh god.
Yeah, but that being said, though, like I do like Jake. I just wish, for context reasons, they could have better illustrate why Wesker has a kid. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, though, right? He was born before Wesker got his, enhanced powers from the progenitor virus. So, unless it was the C virus, which I thought it was, the injection he took that gave him enhanced powers, that was my understanding. But it turns out I was wrong. He always had them since birth, I guess. But again, it was not properly explained, and Capcom should give the character a chance and give us better context on how Wesker Jr. is what he is.
I do think it would be really interesting to see if they ever decided to approach a Resident Evil 6 remake to see what they could actually do with the character. Because they've done a really good job with going back and taking characters that were people's favorites Looking at you, Ashley. I love you in remake. Did not like you in OG, but it would be interesting to see what they could do with Jake.
Yep.
Slash, it is your turn. I'll go last.
Well, so we want to talk about Jake. I've got to get Jack because Jake causes me a lot of pain.
Oh, this is your lot. Damn, oh, shit.
Why you sound like Joker right now, bro?
That Jack hits hard.
Cars.
That Jack hits hard. But no, I think Jake's just a shitty fucking character all around. Like, I know I've been watching my language this whole podcast, but this time I'm really going to go out because I hate Jake as a character. Simply due to the fact that he is supposed to be the Wesker Jr. and he's such a boring character to be Wesker Jr. for me. I don't even care about the romance plot line between him and Sherry because, like, I don't buy it. I just don't. I don't buy him as Wesker Jr. I don't buy him and Sherry. I just didn't buy that entire story. Like, and I like Resident Evil 6. I like it. I like Leon and Chris's stories. But Jake's is one of those that, like, I just, it was so boring to play through, especially that opening. Like, you know, sometimes going Michael Bay can work for the guy who is the action hero of Resident Evil, Leon. That's not really going to work with a character that nobody gives a shit about, and you're not showing a reason we should give a shit about him, because his first scene is literally him walking up to, like, a zombie, having a conversation with it, and then proceeding to do weird kung fu moves on it. And it's like, that's not really a great way to introduce a character in this universe, personally.
But it's interject with that real quickly. I absolutely love that part, mostly because that's kind of what Capcom has made Resident Evil out to be since the beginning. A lot of people don't like that now, and I completely respect, everyone's opinions about how they view the game. But a lot of people also either forget or don't realize that the entire plot for Resident Evil was supposed to be like a take on a Hollywood movie from back in the days, like over dramatic and all over the place. I get it. I know it's too strong. I completely respect your opinion on this.
Oh no, I was talking about Jack.
Didn't you? I expect your opinion on that too. Love Jack, by the way. Love Jack. Yeah, I personally love the intro just because of like how over the top it is. It's meant to be like that, and it kind of, for me, added a little to the character, especially with evolving down the line after they got captured. They were trapped. They finally got back together. Jake kind of having this little attitude towards everything that he's finding out about what his past is, and then for Sherry to kind of like bring him back down into the world of not everything is about you. Stop taking the blame and stop doing this little pity party. Take responsibility for your own actions, and kind of like helping him become his own person. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I get that. I just felt like he should have had, like, with Resident Evil, like, even in some of the action, it's like Sheva has a really, she's a new character, and she doesn't have a very grandiose way of being introduced. Even Helena and Piers, they have really great introductions in that game. Piers really gives off the idea in his first scene that he really cares about Chris.
Helena, I don't know about that one. She's just so dry.
I feel Piers is the dry one.
That is fair though, but you actually feel the emotion out of him. Helena's, I'm just like, are you a Barbie doll? What's going on here?
Yeah. It might also be due to the fact that I don't like how Jake plays either. And the Eustenox sections, I don't like that, but the one part I did not like about Resident Evil 6 The one that still makes me roll my eyes is when the Ada clone goes, "So you're little Wesker Jr." And I'm just like,
Yeah, I bet
like,
you were.
So if you're like that, imagine how the people felt when that was spoiled in the trailer.
oh yeah, wait, I went back and saw the trailer when I first played the game because I'd bought it on my PS4 like a long time ago, like a couple years after it came out on PS4. And I was like, I never ended up playing Resident Evil 6, so I'll check it out. And then I played it for a second, and I was like, the Leon campaign's pretty good, and I really like this. It's kind of got Resident Evil 2 vibes with a mixture of Resident Evil 4. And then I looked at the trailer, and they said Little Wesker Jr., and they just show his face, and I'm just like, that? And God bless Troy Baker. God bless him for doing the voice work for Jake. I just... Now, would I want to see him remade? Absolutely. I want to see what they can like do, switch him around with, just like how Ren said with Ashley. And just on top of that, the implication of Jake's age, at the time of what 2013 that his section takes place in.
I believe he's like 20.
He's at 20.
Yeah, he's real young, so I think he's like 20.
I think there's a 6-year age difference between him and Sherry, if I remember right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because she's like 26, 27.
She is forever 18. Thanks our healing factor.
Well,
Okay.
you're not wrong.
She's 26, going on 27 in RE6.
Okay, so we are supposed to imply that Wesker absolutely had to stop his world domination plans, as well as his overview of Plagas situation, to fuck a woman and conceive a child.
Well, his conception would be well before all that, so I mean, in theory, it's not out of ordinary. It's just the only plot hole, I guess, would be like how did he get his enhanced strength when Wesker didn't have his right away?
I will point out. I will point out too, you guys made a good point, because if he's 20 in 2013, that means he was conceived in 1993 before any of that happened.
Yeah, Capcom doubled down on that too. When people saw the spoiler trailer, they made it a point to say this is when Wesker fucked afterwards. I just thought it was funny, but then I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, okay, he's still a young upstart researcher, and he still has these sort of hatreds to humanity. It still is kind of weird in my opinion.
And he would have had the progenitor virus, but he wouldn't have had any of the other stuff. So it doesn't really make sense for Jake to have the immunity and the antibodies that he does.
Yeah,
unless when the child is born, though, is already unlocked. You don't need to like do anything extra shit to unlock it. That could be it. Because like when you have a child, like they will get unique genes that will be activated and shit, right? No, that's how biology works, right? So I imagine maybe that's why he got his virus unlocked early. Which begs the question then, guy helped the mom then, because like he would have been a handful.
I don't know if they put that much thought into that.
Capcom doesn't put much thought in
exactly.
Much.
They don't. It's up to us to make some headcanon shit.
Like who do you think you are, Scott Cawthon?
Well, don't threaten me.
But to finish off what I was saying, it's like I just think Jake's one of the worst. He's not worse than like the Revelation guys, those two random dudes in the Arctic. He's not worse than them. He's absolutely not worse than them. I don't even remember their names. But he's genuinely one of the worst characters, in my opinion. And I want to see him remade due to the fact that I want to see it better. Because Wesker Jr. has a lot of possibilities because it pertains to Project W. The fact that there could have been more Weskers. And like, but it's a different take on it. But I just want to see it. done well. I want to see him written well, because he retains a lot of the bad aspects of Wesker that I didn't like. Like some of the hardcore edginess I didn't really like from Jake. Just felt. Can you calm down? I'm trying. I'm in a podcast. Please stop growling. Please stop growling. Why are you growling?
Yo, I hear the slander of Jake. He's like, okay, what was that, homie? I'm gonna take that
Can
back.
you please stop growling? I'm trying to do a podcast. God damn it. Okay, well, fuck Jake and fuck anyone who. That's it.
One thing I will say in Jake's defense for the edgy attitude, he is only 20, and that's just how people are when they're that age.
Oh, that, and considering the shit he gone through as a kid, I can only imagine him being edgy would be justified.
Yeah.
Like I said, though, I do agree. This should tone it down a bit for the next time to bring him back, but like they can't say it's not justified.
Yeah, I mean, the first like section that you play as him, he is thrown into war-torn Edenia, and that place has been sort of fucked up well before the C virus came into the equation, from what I read in the lore. So he's kind of just drafted into that war. It explains the scar on his face and everything. As for how I feel about Jake as a character, Wesker Jr., all that stuff, I don't hate him as much as I would hate Clint and Keith, which is the two idiots from Revelations 1 that would try to be all macho and it failed. So I don't think he's that bad. But I think the issue is that I don't like some of the inconsistency with Jake. Namely speaking, when he got mad at Chris, I thought that was really, really stupid, because the whole game he's kind of like, well, Wesker's my father. I don't really care too much about him. He's an asshole or whatever. And then at this one moment, you get Jake sort of being angry that Chris killed his father. I know it's like daddy issues, but he should be kind of happy afterwards, considering he was such an asshole and slandering him and all this other stuff. It could have been a more better and emotional moment. I don't know. I just don't know if they remake that scene how they would write it. I think what you should do is just take away the element that Jake hates him. Let's say he doesn't know who Wesker is at all. It's Edonia. No one knows anything. A bunch of Europeans just having an all-out war. If you take that element out where he knew about Wesker the whole time and no one wants to tell him, no one wants to even reveal it, even Sherry kind of acts like, oh, I don't want to tell him the real secret or whatever, what happened, Chris killed him. If you take that knowledge out and then you do it, and then he finds out he has no idea, Chris tells him that he was justified, he tried to blow up the world, you can see the angst there, and it'll make better sense if he just doesn't know. But the way they executed it in the original game was poor, in my opinion. Now, I do like just all the dumb one-liners and kung fu that you could do on people. I thought that was kind of fun, playing around with Jake a little bit. It's one of the more entertaining moments of that entire section. Otherwise, I wasn't really digging the love story. It kind of was just sort of put there just simply because, in my opinion, hey, you have now the best friends, their sort of offspring are now dating, and it just kind of felt like, yeah, it's.
I was about to bring that up. Like, anyone find that kind of ironic how two best friends have their children dating each other, or some shit like that? It's kind of weird when you realize it.
It's weird, and it's also kind of like a little stereotypical when you think about it. I just think that could have been done a lot more better or organically, which is what a remake could fix, Capcom. But other than that, it just feels like, and this is going to be a weird comparison, people kind of just treat Jake as like DMC Dante, where it's like he has moments where he kind of does something a little bit cool. I would say he's actually a bit cooler than the reboot Dante, and then there's moments where it's like, oh, this writing is absolutely horrible, what were they thinking? And I also just don't buy Wesker going out to some random country and deciding to put his cum in a turkey baster and put it in this random woman. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, why would he do this? I don't get it.
That's literally the part that I don't buy either. I feel like Wesker would be very picky and discerning about who he decides to make his super child with.
Yeah.
If at all.
Are we going to ignore what Ren just said?
Yes.
I did.
I'm sorry.
What that turkey baster do?
Sorry. That's gonna be clipped too. Oh my god.
Can I give you this magazine and this turkey baster?
Well,
How long you need? 20 minutes? 7 minutes is all I need.
And I got a question to ask. Do you think that Wesker could have other children? If he's willing to have one, I want to put it past him to have another one.
Yeah.
oh god. Jake Jr., Senorita. I don't know how they would do that. It would be cool to see like a female offspring of Wesker, and I would like some sort of weird difference, like whereas Jake kind of turned good, but she's like bad. I would
Daddy's
think,
girl.
I think
Oh,
yeah,
yeah.
Daddy's girl. I think that'd be really interesting if they did something like that, honestly. But we're going to move on to the next question, which is number 10. So since Wesker's kind of just in the fertilizer right now from missiles and everything,
Allegedly.
if they did revive the character, what would you want to happen, especially with how, you know, lackluster some of the villains have been lately? Do you agree with it, or do you think he should be dead forever? And remember, Ben, I will have you go first.
So I'm torn on this because I would be interested to see how they could bring him back, because I know there's been some debate as to whether the RPG round actually hit him or not. But to me, every time I played through RE5 and gotten to the end, his head is clearly taken off to me. So everyone's like, no, it goes a little to the right. I'm like, I see his head getting taken off every single time. So I'm also kind of like, how would they bring him back when they literally took his head off? I'm not sure how they could revive him. And I thought about it a lot. I'm not sure how they could revive him without changing the ending to RE5, which would be interesting because he's essentially not mentioned really that much in the following 3 games. So that's part of why, even though I do agree with what you had said, can't remember, actually I can't remember who said it, who mentioned that eventually he did have to die, and I do agree with that. I do think though that to a point maybe there wasn't a big plan for what to do after they killed him off, and I think that's where I always maintain that Capcom kind of shot themselves in the foot with that, because they got rid of the mastermind, the person who was basically pulling a lot of the strings, whether it was something that Spencer's big plan or not. Wesker was the one kind of pulling all the strings in a sense. But it's almost like they didn't actually have a plan for who to have step in after him. And we have kind of had just a lackluster chain of villains, or the ones that were kind of interesting or had some potential were also just killed off after like a movie. Like, I mean, say, you know, think what you might. I mean, set aside the sheer campiness of the fights in Vendetta, I actually thought Arius was quite interesting. He could, like, there was potential with him. There was potential with Alex. We've been left with a lot of unanswered questions, and with some of the villains that were really cool and potentially interesting, and some that were lackluster. Do I want Wesker himself to be revived though? I still am not sure, I think is really what my answer is. Because I don't know how they could do it when like I said, I see his head getting taken off every time. Like, I don't know that there's a way that he could be brought back, so to speak, without it being too much. But at the same time, I can't remember how they described it, but I know they did have a way that he came back. And as much as I know everybody does not like the series, they did mention how they brought him back in the Netflix series. And that was the first time I'd ever heard a solid suggestion as to how he could come back. Now, I don't remember what they said, but I know they had an actual plausible explanation for him coming back.
R.A.P. Lance.
Yeah. Also, I liked a lot of the things that he did.
Yeah.
But I did appreciate that they actually had a plan for how he came back, because it didn't make sense until they were like, oh no, this is how they brought him back. I just don't remember what that way was. But anyway, so that was my long rambling answer. I don't know if these should be brought back, and even if they did, I don't know how they would manage to do it.
Brandon, what about you?
Okay, I'm gonna keep it $1.50. No, they should not bring him back at all, because it not only it would invalidate everything we set up for Resident Evil 5. More importantly, though, if they bring him back and they did it horribly, not only you just invalidate what happened before, now you have a shit storyline. Because people don't like the current villains way with villains now, because either they don't stick around or it's just bad villains, right? Imagine if they dropped the ball with Wesker. People are gonna be mad because they brought him back and they dropped the ball with him. So for that one reason alone, they should not bring him back at all. And on top of that, we already have a problem of not only Capcom, but Namco has a habit of bringing back dead characters that should stay dead. Case in point, look at Bison. This man died. Now, granted, there's another story related things behind Bison, so I will give him the benefit of down that one. But Bison's dead. Why the hell did you bring him back in the next game? Granted, timeline-wise, it's been years since he was gone, but why bring him back? He's dead. Leave him alone. That takes away the accomplishment of the main character from last game. Heihachi Mishima. He was fucking dead. That fool took a lava bath, and yet he's still alive somehow. So, no. Let's stop bringing back dead villains. Especially when their death is pretty concrete. Leave them be. No ifs, ands, or buts. Use other characters. Fuck, give them kids. All I care. Just do not bring back characters like this.
All right, so I wanna talk about my perspective on this real quick. So I'm kind of 50-50. It's like if they brought him back, but it was interesting in a way, I wouldn't mind it. But I also see the effect of, well, if you bring him back, it does make death kind of meaningless at a certain point. Like, if I feel like him being in the remakes obviously is kind of cool, because you can sort of just mess with the past and you're not messing with the present, which is a fun idea. But I also am of the mindset where I do believe that these viruses are getting so ridiculous in a sense that we already kind of have a cloning virus, C virus, because we already saw it with Ada and Carla and all the shenanigans of that game. So it's just like a hypothetical. If they want to do something as dumb as that, they already did with Resident Evil 6, but whether they revisit it or not, it remains to be seen. I do get all sides though. It's part of me that's like, well, they don't have anyone else, but it's another part of me that's kind of like, well, it'd be kind of cool. Then there's another part that's kind of like, maybe build up someone else, because I like the suggestion of Glenn Arias in chat. He beat Chris in combat. You could say he beat him hand to hand twice. If he would have probably lived and they would have done some weird post credits, he survived or something like that, I think he would have been interesting going forward, because you have someone who can fight Chris or Leon and stand toe to toe, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. So we just need the idea of maybe have someone linger around and not die immediately in a movie or a game, which is why I really hate the villain of Death Island, because he embodies every single trope of that to a T. And not only that, he's boring. So I really did not like Dylan at all. But I'm going to pass.
Dylan was the worst.
He's just so boring. It's like they could have done an interesting backstory with him. Oh, a survivor, a hunt guy of Raccoon City, cool. Does nothing interesting after the fact. It's just disappointing. But Avian, what about you? What do you think of them reviving Wesker or keeping him dead permanently?
So I think they can revive Wesker and I would be okay with it, only under the influence of they remake 5 and they change the story. If they go based off of old 5, then no. It would make no sense. It would kind of ruin everything they've done so far. But if they were to remake it and they were to say, hey, we're going to show his death a different kind of way where we can play off of the trope of, oh, is he dead? Is he not dead this time? Instead of, hey, he took a whole rocket to the face. There's no way of coming back from that. Then I'd be a little more accepting of something like that.
Flash, what about you? Do you have any opinions on this?
I think I gave a little opinion on it earlier when I was talking about Chris's arc in Village, what I felt like it should be. Because what I want Wesker back again. What is it with me and not being able to fully pronounce words today? Would I want to see Wesker back again? Sure. Like, I love Wesker. Wesker's a fun villain. He's one of my favorite villains in gaming history. But just for the sake of the story, I don't think he should be alive. And when Renren was talking about the RPG hit theories, that's always been weird to me. Because why on God's green earth would Resident Evil introduce the RPG as the ultimate final boss killer? This is the ultimate killer of anything. Nothing can survive it. Not even a powered up Mr. X could survive it. So why would they direct hit Wesker with 2 of the fuckers and not kill him? Because even with and even if it did miss, he's taken a lava bath. Like, Mr. X is the only one who's ever been able to survive something like that, simply out of the fact that his trench coat was protecting him from that. And then it all burned away, and then we got a super tyrant. But like I said earlier, I think if you want to bring back Wesker, he should be psychologically in Chris's head, manipulating him from the inside. Batman Arkham Knight Joker, like I said. I feel like that's one of the psychologically having someone in your head is terrifying to me. And I feel like having Wesker in Chris's head would be so much fun because you could get so many interactions out of them. And you could get so many world building elements of the people around Chris reacting to that. Because what's the first thing Chris is going to do if he's going to see Wesker again? Even in his head, he's going to go punch him. So it's just going to look to his buddies like he's just punching air. And they're like, this guy's crazy. I don't think we can trust him. And so you can sow seeds of doubt within his own team. And that creates more conflict that you can capitalize in the story. What was... Let me go back to this. There was another part of this question. The lackluster villains aspect. I feel like if the games would just, focus on one villain instead of saying, oh, people have a negative reaction to this villain, let's change it. That's not how you create good villains. That's just how you throw away villains like they're nothing. You've got to stick with a character you've created. And even if the first outing is bad, keep going with that character until you find the right until you find the right combo of writing and performance for that character. Because I felt like if Alex Wesker was continued, if her plotline was continued with her taking over Natalie's body, I feel like you could have gotten a lot of great stories out of that. Even with the mold storyline, you can keep we're talking about like Wesker, a character who was the main villain for five main games and a side game, but there were still other tinier villains there that took up his spot while he was in the background, manipulating things. And it's not to say get rid of Mother Miranda, get rid of Evelyn. It's just keep a center villain who's at the epicenter of it all, and tie it all back to the same character. We know, hell, you could have introduced a character who works for the BSAA in one of the Revelations games and have him slowly manipulating everything behind the scenes, because now we know the BSAA is corrupt. They're sending BOW weapons as soldiers to fight their battles. So obviously someone's in control, and that's our big bad for the next game. But it should have been introduced earlier, because then we would actually have some attachment to this villain about why we want to stop them. You shouldn't have to rely on the name of the BSAA alone to have a good villain. So, it's a finicky spot, because with all the lackluster villains, you got a lot of fans wanting Wesker back. But if you bring Wesker back, you're going to alienate a much larger portion of the fan base who don't want him back. And then you just create as much divide as you did with Resident Evil 7. So it's a lose-lose situation for Capcom. They do.
All right, and we're moving to the final question of the night. And that is simply, to end this podcast, what is your favorite quote from Albert Wesker? Brandon, I'll have you go first.
Oh, damn, put me in the spot here. That's actually a good question. So many of them. It's the easiest ones are the beamed ones from Resident Evil 5, of course, right? But no, I'm just gonna say how disappointing, because I love the enthusiasm or lack thereof whenever he insults his whatever character he playing as.
I'm trying to think of, well, I one line I kind of really liked is sort of the banter of him and Chris during RE5. I thought that was perfect, to be honest. Even kings bow before gods. That was just peak irony and peak funniness, in my opinion. I'm trying to think of like any other lines that I may have. I liked, well, obviously it's a no-brainer. I'm gonna say this one: 7 minutes. 7 minutes is all I have to spare and play with you. I thought that was pretty cool, and I'm trying to think of an underrated line that not a lot of people really talk about. I kind of like the line where and it happens when you go down into Lisa's tomb in RE1 remake, and he says something like, "You're a bit of a mess up, Chris, take a piece of the action." And that just kind of sounds a little bit badass, even though it's he's kind of scolding Lisa for being a failed experiment, and Chris doesn't know the entire time. He's like, what the fuck is this thing? The fact that he referenced that there kind of just shows he has some history with this creature, and it's a little subtle line, but I thought it was pretty cool. It kind of shows some of his intention, as well as saying, hey Chris, you're my best man, so help me out before I get knocked off the edge. But those are my favorite lines so far. Ren and Ben, do you have any?
I do, and believe it or not, they are not from RE5, although I do love all of his iconic RE5 lines. My favorite still is from Code Veronica. Sure, I'm not human anymore, but just look at the power I've gained. The pose, he's like the come at me pose, and like he's just like he's so proud of himself, and I'm just like, bro, dude, you're so campy.
He had an erection when he said that.
Probably.
What the hell?
I mean, think about it. He is saying it to Chris, if I remember correctly. So, just saying. But anyways, yeah. So that one, and probably, I mean, honestly, who doesn't love the 7 minutes line? I mean, come on. And the fact that like, not only does he say 7 minutes are all I have to play with you, but if you do not end that fight within 7 minutes, it actually ends in 7 minutes. Like that's still like when I found that out, I was like, oh damn, that's amazing. That's a nice touch. That is the kind of attention to detail that I am here for. Anyways, but those are mine.
Rin Ben, I may need you to repeat your first one because I didn't notice that I wasn't muted. I kind of coughed over it, so that's my bad.
Oh, no worries. I can repeat it again. So my first favorite is from Code Veronica when he says, "Sure, I'm not human anymore, but just look at the power I've gained." And that one is still my favorite because it's so campy and he's so bragging about himself, and I just love it. I just think it's fantastic. And then of course the 7 minutes line.
Also, fuck you, Brandon. I had an accident.
I'm innocent.
Uh-huh. But next up is Avian. What's your favorite Wesker lines?
Favorite or favorites? I have quite a few.
Favorites, actually. Plural.
I would have to go right now with Resident Evil HD Remaster when he's like, "Chris, you make me proud, but of course you're one of my men." Like so arrogant, like, oh, you're only the person you are because of me, and so I have to take pride in that work. Another one is like when he's choking Claire in Code Veronica, and he's just like, let's just say I'm a ghost coming back to haunt your dear brother. It's like the ominous like feeling you get from that, where he's just, I could kill you right now, but it'd be too easy, to take you away from the one person I hate more than anything. Resident Evil 5, I'm a god, and even kings bow to gods, what was said earlier. It's just one of the best things. 7 minutes is the most classic cliche anyone will ever say. Even people who didn't play Resident Evil 5, they're just like, oh, 7 minutes, with a fake, pushing up the fake glasses on their face. Damn. I would probably have to say my number one is towards the ending of Resident Evil 5 when they're on the fighter plane and he's just like complete global saturation. It just puts the oomph and everything that has happened up until that point that is just yes. If you were rooting for the bad guy, that would be it.
I need to add one more to my list because Avian just jogged my memory.
Yeah.
And that would be in Separate Ways in RE4 Remake when you get the complete local saturation line.
Yeah.
I lost my shit when I heard that because I was just like, oh my god, they reference. Yes, like oh, the sheer joy that I feel every time I hear that line delivered. I'm just like, oh, this is the best. This is what it's like to be like a good video game and be a fan of a good video. Anyway, sorry, I'm done.
Yeah. Oh, one more. For Code Veronica, when he's just like, I'm not interested in your apologies. I'm here to take what's mine. It's like, I'm sorry, but that's daddy vibes. I gotta be honest.
Wait a minute. Oh my god.
I'm sorry.
Well, before this podcast gets any more lewd.
It's like he knows what he wants.
Yeah, he does.
Yes.
I'm gonna jump off a cliff now. No, don't get it. But
no, don't pull a Jill. No,
don't pull a Jill. Well, Jill went with them off the cliff, so I think that's even funnier.
Too soon.
I'm sorry, I had to make the joke. It was just laying in wait. But Slash, what about you? What is your favorite quotes of Albert Wesker?
Well, of course, everyone's got 7 minutes. This is all I have to play with. But what I love more is during the cutscene after that, where it's a first-person cutscene, and he walks up to you. It's so campy, and I love it. Your life hinges upon this fight. And then he kicks you through a fucking door, and I love that. Another one of my favorite lines of his is, it's a more serious line, but I love the line that he gives, like, before he reveals Jill, and it's like, we last met at the Spencer estate, wasn't it? And then he pulls the hood down, and then she pulls the hood down, and as he says, like, or right before Mandela effect, isn't this one big family reunion? That is one of my favorite lines in the entire series, one big family reunion, because it perfectly encapsulates the twist. Because you're just like, wait, what? And then it's Jill. If you didn't already guess, it was Jill. Of course, the the I don't need anyone else. I have Ouroboros. And then he just goes on a tangent about in less than like, I don't remember how many minutes, probably 7 minutes again. He says, just complete global saturation. He says it with so much energy and like so much sexual energy. It's oh my god, it's so weird. and then of course I cannot go without the classic Wesker lines without repeating one more joke. Chris, stop it.
No. God, no.
Chris, stop it.
Oh, wait. Another one. Real quick, since he mentioned the global saturation, I like the real one.
No.
Global masturbation.
Oh, why would he reference it?
It's just the more we talking about this, the more like more stuff pops into my head.
Complete global.
I'm just sitting here with popcorn for this part of the
Yeah.
conversation.
It's Resident Evil 5 when he's like, to show your appreciation for my help, I'll give you the privilege of being the first to die. And I'm like, yes.
I also
water.
like, what is it? You will not live to see the dawn.
Yeah.
So good.
Oh, and then when you're hiding from him in the match where he doesn't have line of sight, he's just like, you're merely postponing the inevitable. It's like, oh,
There you are.
That's a great line. There you are. Found you.
I also just love that essentially all of his iconic RE5 lines, like 90%, probably 99% of what he says as a killer in DVD is over that game.
Yeah.
It's all over there, and I'm totally
the one voice line I wish they would have added to DVD that they didn't is when he says, the world is mine to shape as I please. You know, instead of, I would have preferred that one over like, I will spread Ouroboros to the world. Like, dude, you're not even in the same universe anymore. You're stuck now. Calm down.
Hey, you know what? Look, he can spread it all over the Dead by Daylight universe. So you know what? It still counts. Still counts.
Jesus Christ. This
He can
podcast.
spread it. Going back doesn't need to do.
Whoa,
There's
wait.
nothing more terrifying than rounding a corner and seeing a Wesker as he quotes in Dead by Daylight. There's nothing more terrifying than that.
I will say that for a very long time, the only two characters that I had P100'd in that game were Wesker and Chris. Because even though yes is technically Leon, I play with him as Chris because in DBD, if you get a Wesker and you are playing as the Chris Redfield skin, you get lines that you do not get if you are not playing Chris.
It's gonna be the same thing with Dracula and Trevor.
Nice.
It's
But yeah, I
also
mean
like,
it's fantastic, and that's why I P100 did Chris.
Someone's gonna get pedigree, but we do have to wrap up the podcast with outros. So
Wrap it up, Brent.
Hey man,
Bring us home, Ren.
all right, so you can find me on YouTube at Renegade Operative. You can find me on Twitch at Renegade_Operative, where I'll probably be just working on this podcast, streaming, all that fun stuff. But yeah, this should be out sometime tomorrow. Slash, where can we
Yay.
find you?
You can find me at the usual at Slash is back on Twitter. I'm not calling it X Elon. Fuck you. You can follow me at the Slasher of 78 on Twitch. I did say on the last podcast I was on that I would be doing a live stream Suicide Squad review. I'm still waiting on doing that because I simply want to wait till the life cycle of that game is done. You can also find me on what else? I have so many things I don't remember.
Come on, make a flow chart of it. Let's go.
You can find me on YouTube at Slash. Just that. I think it has a knife at the end of it. Let me check. No, just Slash or at the Slasher of 78. I do plan on reviving my YouTube career with reviews. So yeah.
Ren Ben, where could we find you?
You can find me on Twitch, YouTube, Twitter, all that good stuff. I'm RenRenBen on all of those, except for TikTok, where you can find me at RenRenBenBen.
Brenda?
You can find me on Shitter at Immortal Brandle, and you can find my link tree in my bio, OnlyFans, all that stuff. You can see my other affiliations and stuff.
What the hell?
His OnlyFans, you know? Yeah.
I knew he was a simp.
Look, man, sometimes you just gotta throw it back for the good of mankind, alright? Now, that being said, yeah, you find me there. You can see my affiliations and socials and yada, yada, yada. Everyone else is none of your goddamn business. Fuck off.
Brendan DeMaio over here. All right, then. Avian, where can we find you?
Before that, Slash, see your profile picture. Awesome. I'm also a wrestling fan. You can find me on Twitch and Twitter, not X. Fuck you, Elon, consensually. Under femwolf_VT.
All right, and we are going to end this podcast. It was a ton of fun. 3 hours of Wesker. I wonder who the next RE character is going to be. Respectively, I think it probably might be Jill or Leon. It's going to be a toss-up. I might let people vote on that.
I want Chris personally.
Chris would be also a cool one. Whether either way it goes, I think there will be more character analysis of the characters in the series.
5 hours on Clinton Keith.
No, thank God, no. So we will see you guys next time. Fuck those characters of Revelations 1. We are out. Peace.
Bye, bitch.